everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on part 70 of Heaven Official's Blessing, and ooh, our boys! We ended on a very weird cliffhanger last week. They are currently trying to find the Brocade Immortal so it can stay separated from Ling Wen so that they can hopefully find the Guoshi and get exposition answers that we've been waiting for like, I don't know, 100 or so pages for. If not the entire series. And yeah, there was some weird cliffhanger where Hua Chong was like, oh, it looks like it's not going to work for you either, but we don't have an explanation of why that is. So that's why we were looking at chapters 216, 217, 218, and 219 this evening. 4 chapters. We haven't done a 4-chapter one. I think the very first set of chapters in this volume we did 4 chapters, and then after that it's been like 2 or 3. So should be interesting, but not only that, we're also looking at chapter 101 in the Manhua. I'm super excited, but yes, and I have a couple comments that I want to talk about before we dive into this. So I don't know how long this video is going to be, but the Donghua is on hiatus this week and is going to be on hiatus next week. So maybe a lengthy discussion will be worth it, right? For those of you that are not Donghua only, I feel bad for the Donghua only people. It's like they just got 5 episodes in and now they're like, oh, you mean we have to wait 2 more weeks? Okay. But it'll be fine. It'll all be worth it whenever we get to it. So before we dive into the Manhua, I do want to talk about a couple comments that I had pop up here in the chapters themselves. SQQLBH314 talked about this, and I was like, oh, They basically pointed out that everything from Qi Ying being sent to deal with the Brocade Immortal, getting poisoned by Shi Lian in the Puji Shrine, fighting Ling Wen and the Brocade Immortal at Mount Tonglu, getting nearly swallowed by a mountain, getting hit over the head in a shovel by Yin Yu, becoming a Daruma doll, then becoming a sword, then fighting cursed, resentful spirits, then reporting back to the Heavenly Realm, surrounded in chaos, then getting beat up by the Emperor they've been serving under for hundreds of years, then getting their power sucked dry, getting beat up some more, and maybe losing their best friend, has all happened in a week. When that was pointed out that it has been a week since like the beginning of volume 5, 2 volumes ago, and all the information within volume 5 to 7 has been happening in the span of a week, bar the flashbacks. Oh my God. I'm kind of floored. I'm like, It's a very weird case of spatial awareness when you realize that, but I feel for Qi Ying. I really, really do. Right? Kixke points out that Yin Yu and Shi Wudu, as well as Shi Lian, have all defied the heavens and denied them at some point. Of course, now 2 of them have, seemingly died. We're going to talk about that in a second, which is problematic. But you have the idea that the 3 individuals that I just mentioned have rejected the heavens and tried to carve out their own path. Now, whether that was right or wrong, we see that Shi Wudu, you could argue, did the wrong thing and they died, and Yin Yu did the right thing and they seemingly have died, as we'll talk about in a second. So it makes you root for Shi Lian, who's done both right and wrong, and you're like, well, maybe he'll be 3rd time's a charm. Maybe he'll be the lucky one that meets the Goldilocks standard and gets it just right and is able to squeak away alive. I think Hua Chong would destroy the entire universe if Shi Lian died. I really do. So I don't think Shi Lian's gonna die. No. But at this point, it's just like, what about everybody else, right? I don't think MXTX would kill one of their main characters, but it's the question of like, what's gonna happen to them? Are they gonna end up being together? What about the others? How's that gonna work? Now, the reason why I said seemings to be, last week, luckily, I had theorized that Yin Yu, if the cursed shackle is holding their soul, is probably dead. But I also said in that discussion that we don't know for sure, so it's probably best not to confirm or deconfirm. And then I got a comment in the Discord that was like, oh yeah, Yin Yu's got that anime waifu dead hairstyle, so it fits. And I was like, so I guess they're dead. Would have been nice to find out for myself and confirm it, but yeah, so I'm not gonna lie. I told the mods I'm gonna probably be very scarce in the Discord until I get through volume 8, only because I told them, I was like, I have not been able to read 1 volume of this series, without there being a spoiler. And it's been very frustrating, and I've kind of let it slide, and everybody's been like, oh, I'm sorry. And I'm like, well, maybe it won't happen next time. And then it keeps on happening. And then everybody's like, oh, sorry. And then it keeps on happening. It's a cycle over and over again. And it's become rather frustrating. And I told the mods, I was like, I really would like to experience this story without any spoilers one time for one volume, maybe for the end. If I could get through the end of the series from here on in without being spoiled, that'd be amazing. So I think that's what I'm going to do. And I don't want to not be in the Discord because I like talking to people about the series and I love seeing the fan art, but it's just been so disappointing and sad that it's my own server and I can't be trusted to be able to go in there. And the mods check, but the mods are also in a different time zone. So they go to sleep and then people post spoilers and then they wake up and they're like, what the fudge happened? And that's not fair to them because I'm sure the answer would be, well, Romania, why don't you just stay off during the hours that are not on? And I'm like, well, why should I have to be like limited to my own server because other people can't be respectful and considerate and spoiler tag until the mods say it's okay? And I'm not doing that. I'm like, nah. So I'm going to stay off for right now and just kind of like at least get through this volume. Because I'm like, I didn't even make it to like halfway and people were spoiling. And I'm like, ugh. So yeah, that's just what's going to happen. I'm going to finish out this volume without getting on the Discord. I still would love to talk to you all in the comments. But my mods are going to screen all the comments to make sure that you aren't spoiling. And I told the mods today, because there was one comment where they were like, well, if they edit the one paragraph, you can read it. And I'm like, no, I'm done with that. I'm like, I'm not going to make my mods keep checking to make sure people have edited their paragraphs. Y'all know the rules. You know what I want for spoilers. I've read this thing for 70 weeks now. If you've not figured it out, ask a mod or go to my Patreon, go to my community post. I don't know. But I'm like, I'm only going to talk with people that can respect me as a content creator and like, because it just shows a lack of respect when you spoil and then you're like, oh, sorry. It's like, that means you didn't care what I thought. You just did it. And then it's like, I guess, I don't know. And I hate being that way, but it pisses me off so much. And I'm just kind of over it at this point. I'm almost to the end. I haven't been majorly spoiled, but it's been enough little spoilers that's kind of made me go, And I'm just tired of it. So that's where I'm at. So we'll see. We'll see. But hopefully, if I can, get to volume 8 maybe and people haven't, if I can get to volume 8 and the mods can confirm that people haven't spoiled, but then I don't know. I'm like, then do I get in there and a week into volume 8, somebody spoils and they're like, sorry. And then I'm like, back to square one. Or do I just stay off until I'm finished with the story and then get on? And then hopefully it's fine. I don't know. But that's my biggest pet peeve as a reactor is when people spoil and then say sorry, but don't learn their lesson or don't seem to care. It's really frustrating. So that's where I'm at. But we'll tackle that later. We got to talk about the manhwa. So those are my comments. As far as the manhwa is concerned, we need to dive in and talk about chapter 101. And so this chapter was all like wrapping up Qirong and Lan Chanchu have seemingly disappeared, although Qirong does make an appearance. Star Ember does a really good job of letting Qirong make a little appearance here. So I like that, there's like blood everywhere, there's debris, all of this, and Xianle is like, oh, hey, there's people that we need to rescue. I know we just had this moment, but we need to probably find the people and get out of here. I like that Xianle just puts Fang Xin back, and they're like, let's go do that in Rui. I like the little detail Star Ember draws of Rui wrapping themselves around Xianle's wrist. That's really cute. And then we see, like, there were several panels I didn't include here, but that were showing, like, the people getting out of their jail cells. The idea that Qirong's just had people, like, trapped in prison waiting to be eaten is just bonkers, Star Ember. Just bonkers. I am excited that we're getting these chapters here before we get them in the Donghua, because it'll be nice to compare. Also, I like the little detail of Xianle with the sword on their back, and it's wrapped up by Rui. I like that little detail. That's super cute. And Xianle's wondering how Huachong knew everything about him being the Grand Tutor. And what's so funny is that now that we know what we know about Huachong and that he's kind of been there all along, he's just like, well, here's my Sherlock-y details, and, here's why I would suspect that it was Qirong, and you guys have history, and la la la. And Xianle's just kind of listening like, well, all of this makes sense, but, that's so fascinating. And again, Star Ember just can't let Qirong go without being shown here. And honestly, I love this illustration. This illustration of Qirong is so good, where they're just sitting there like, just like licking the blood off their hand with their long green fingernails. Absolutely wonderful. I absolutely love it. It's probably one of my favorite drawings of him. And you can kind of see the Xianle resemblance a little bit. It's a little different, but I like it a lot. I'm going to lose it when we see Qirong and the Donghua. I'm just going to lose it because they're one of my favorites. One of my faves. And so, yeah, then, you know, Hua Chong is like, well, because of such and such and such and such, this is why I think that I do. And I like Xilian's looking at him being like, wait a minute. How does Hua Chong know about all this stuff in the heavenly realm when he's not a member up there? So that line about Lan Chuanshu accusing Xilian in the upper court, Xilian's like, how does he know that? And we, the audience, know it's because Heshan has been a spy and because he's got butterflies everywhere. So it's like, it's a nice little like callback that you may not even realize at the time. And then Hua Chong goes on to say, you know, it's by coincidence that, you know, Anla was reported ill after the banquet despite never having illness in the past. Isn't that very obviously suspicious? And it is a nice callback Starember does of showing Anla on the slab. And then, of course, we've had, you know, Qirong previously in the manhwa, like, just dissecting people and eating them. Hua Chong's a little bit more respectful, of course. And so, yeah, I really like this side panel of Hua Chong and Xilian just kind of, like, talking about the situation. And Hua Chong just kind of very casually and responsibly and stoically stating what needs to be stated. And Xilian's like, isn't that interesting, huh? And then I like Xilian, just his little, like, I like Xilian's little, like his little sigh where he closes his eyes and puffs out his breath like, Hua Chong, you think you know me so well. And I'm like, yes, he does know you so well. You have no clue how much he knows you so well. It's just, it's so insane that at this point in the story, Xilian does not think that Hua Chong knows him well at all. And by the time we're at this point, we know just how well he knows him. It's such a crazy thing to read in hindsight, right? And I like that Xilian there is like, why did you think that it was Qirong who made the first move? And Hua Chong's like, I didn't know. I just trusted that you didn't. And I like Xilian's little face at the bottom there. He's like, what? Well, why is that? Why did you trust that it wasn't me? Like, what do you know about me that I don't know about myself? And this page is probably my favorite in the chapter, where he's like, they could only be a self-defilement of the clumsiest degree. Hua Chong's like, you're just being self-loathing. And he's like, I knew that that wouldn't be the case. Like, he has so much faith in him, and he knows Xilian. And Xilian just has that little, oh, you think you know me? Even though we're like, now at volume 7, we know just how much Hua Chong does know him, and it's hilarious. And then, yeah, Xilian says, I'm not the person that you think I am. And I'm like, oh, you have no clue. He says, and he tries to talk, and Hua Chong's like, go on, say it. Say what's on your mind. He says, you shouldn't put so much faith in another. You shouldn't think of other people as being too perfect. It'd be okay if it were someone you'd never met or had only seen from a distance. He's like, but once you... And I like that the panel here has Xilian, like, holding his hands. Like, he's like, but if you're close to that person and you find out one day they're the opposite of how you think, you'll become disappointed. And Hua Chong's like, don't be so sure. He's like, I don't care about the disappointment of others. He's like, I've watched you at your worst, and I still love you. It's like, I love that. And then it ends with this part here. He's like, to some people, the very existence of a person on this earth is hope in itself. So again, I think that's a really nice juxtaposition of tying chapter 101 to this last set of chapters, especially with Yin Yu and Qi Ying, and the idea of them, like, the idea of Qi Ying and Yin Yu, like the confession that happened there, and you have Hua Chong and Xilian's confession, like the idea of all you need is one person, just one, as Xilian would say, just one person is enough to care about and want to save. And it's so great to see these manhwa chapters and see it all come full circle. It's absolutely wonderful, and I love it so much. So yeah, I'm really all about this manhwa chapter. I didn't have a lot of images to share. A lot of them were just people getting out of cells, and there was a lot of really good frames of expressions and artwork, and that Qirong frame, hell yes. But aside from that, it wasn't too crazy, and so we'll have a week off after this, and then chapter 102 will be a week from now. 2 weeks from now, technically. So yeah, oh y'all. Again, as per usual, I have no clue where this story is going. I don't. And I keep thinking in volume 7 that things are going to happen in a certain way, shape, or form. And MXTX, this entire volume, like this is the polar opposite of volume 6. Volume 6, you were like, once you started book 4, you were like, oh, white calamity, gonna be tragic, gonna be terrifying. And it was. This volume, this gives us nothing. And this gives us nothing. And so far, the story has gone every other direction you can imagine instead of linearly like you think it's going to. So, I don't know. There better be a picture this week. That's all I can say. There better be a picture this week because the last few weeks have been leaving us with a lot to be desired. So, we're not going to waste any more time. We are going to dive right into it and see what we get. So, in any case, we are going to start part 70, chapters 216 to 219 of Heaven Official's Blessing. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Chapter 216, hard to put on, harder to take off. I'm assuming that's talking about the brocade immortal. Xianle then pulled out all the black robes, blindly picking them at them, trying to find the brocade immortal with no success. He could only put on the white cultivator robe that he had tossed on the side anew and turned to Hua Chong. Well, this really isn't working. It looks like we'll have to take the entire chest of clothes with us. Hearing this, Hua Chong and snickered, and Xianle felt a little woeful, feeling rather ridiculous himself, taking a few dozen robes as blackmail material. How silly. But with things as they were, there really weren't any better ideas. Yet unexpectedly, just as he was stuffing all the randomly strewn black robes back into the chest and was about to carry the thing, the doors to the side chamber opened, and Ling Wen walked in with a hand behind her back, looking exhausted. Ling Wen was probably done resting and was ready to return to put the brocade immortal back on. Yet she ran into the two uninvited guests who had broken into the chamber, one looking incredibly innocent, while the other looked nonchalant. With no words to say about the situation, the two of her fingers were instantly put together and pressed against her temple. She was going to inform Jun Wu. However, Hua Chong moved faster than her. With only a look, the two doors to the side chamber rapidly shut closed, and Ling Wen's face also suddenly appeared to have dropped as she lowered her hand. Hua Chongzu is indeed incredible. San Long, you've created a ward, Xianle asked. I've established a small one, Hua Chong said. The perimeter is only set to the side chamber. Jun Wu could establish a ward within the heavenly capital, isolating everyone within the ward from the outside world. Naturally, Hua Chong could also create an even smaller ward, sealing the spiritual powers of those within and preventing them from communicating spiritually. A small ward within a larger ward. In this moment, the side chamber had become a chest within a chest. However, this was Jun Wu's domain after all. The ward established couldn't be built too big, lest Jun Wu would notice. Xianle nodded. Ling Wen, I'm sure you can see that the brocade immortal is currently in our hands. If you don't want to have it burnt to bits by ghost fire, please don't make any reckless moves. Yet unexpectedly, when Ling Wen heard him, she laughed. Oh, but your highness, Ling Wen said, the brocade immortal isn't actually in your hands. To be honest, Xianle had suspected as much. Nonetheless, he still voiced the most logical deduction of the current situation. Ling Wen, after you've come in and out, you didn't wear it anymore. I don't think the brocade immortal is anywhere else but here inside this chamber. However, Ling Wen said, Your Highness, have you perhaps misunderstood something? I only said it's not in the chest in your hands. I didn't say it wasn't here inside this chamber. Hearing this, Xianle suddenly thought of a possibility and slightly turned his head. Hua Chong must have thought the same thing as he did, and they both moved their gazes to the white robe on Xianle's person. Ah, you've guessed right, Ling Wen said. Right now, it's being worn by your highness. Oh, shit, no. Earlier when Xianle was trying on the other black robes, he'd casually thrown aside the white robe that he had wore. Later, when he inspected the clothes, all the robes had already been lumped together. Somehow, the brocade immortal had unsuspectingly taken on the appearance of the white cultivator robes and was picked up and put on his person. Xianle looked down at the clothes and wondered inwardly, then where's my original outer robe? Hua Chong casually lifted his hand, and the chest of robes toppled over, the black robes within spilling onto the ground, and hidden deep within the dozen of black robes, there was one white robe crushed to the bottom. The real outer robe that Shilian had worn coming in. Needless to say, this must be a wicked spell that the brocade immortal had cast. While the two were trying on clothes randomly, it took the chance and dragged Shilian's outer robe into the chest, while it slipped out and transformed into the robe's appearance to replace it, and allowed itself to be picked up and put back on by Shilian. Shilian wasn't surprised in the least, but rather confused. Well, isn't that a little too cunning? It was only an article of clothing. Besides, didn't they say the brocade immortal itself wasn't very clever? However, it wasn't hard to guess that this was most likely Ling Wen who had taught it this idea. Sure enough, Ling Wen said, I gave it this idea and didn't actually think it'd come to use. So now it's as if it was I who made your highness wear this brocade immortal. If it was Hua Chong who had handed the robe to Shilian and Shilian put it on, then the commander would be Hua Chong. However, if the brocade immortal used Ling Wen's idea and tricked Shilian into wearing it, then the commander was Ling Wen, which meant the Shilian now would obey Ling Wen's word and heed her every order. Ling Wen, Shilian tried, have you never thought the brocade immortal might not work on me? Ling Wen smiled. I won't know until I've tried. Your Highness, from now on, you cannot attack me. If you hear me, then nod your head. Shilian didn't intend to nod. Yet unexpectedly, after Ling Wen gave her order, before Shilian knew it, he'd already involuntarily nodded. How come it was now effective? It clearly didn't work when Hua Chong gave orders. Could it be that it was only ineffective when the commander was Hua Chong? If that was the case, then the tables had suddenly turned. Shilian didn't move, Hua Chong didn't move either, and the two only exchanged looks, both very calm and steady. Ling Wen was calm and steady too. Then now, will Hua Chongzu please remove the ward from the side chamber? Shilian instantly said, so long, don't do it. Are you sure, Your Highness? Ling Wen said, I can order you to do anything. Hua Chong remained still, and Shilian thought, even if I can't touch Ling Wen, it's all right. No one else is under such restrictions. As long as Song Long catches her off guard and seizes her, preventing her from giving any orders, the problem should be solved. However, Ling Wen was sharp and guessed their plans. She added, Hua Chong, so I suggest you not waste your time thinking of ways to catch me off guard, to hold me down. Your Highness, listen well. If Hua Chongzu is to attack me or do any sort of harm towards me, then you will attack him. With this, she blocked the plans the other party could have possibly used first. All right, Hua Chongzu, it's time to remove the ward, Ling Wen said. I have work to do still. The palace of Ling Wen is piled with civil matters, and I need to manage that. I have matters I need to manage that haven't been looked through yet. Can we solve this little problem quickly? Hua Chong only smirked. The next moment, Ling Wen's eyes widened, and she appeared as if she wanted to speak, but no voice was coming out. If there was anyone standing behind her right now, they would discover that on her back of her neck there perched a wraith butterfly with silver fluttering wings since who knows when. It was this tiny little creature that stopped her body from moving and made her voice unable to sound. Hua Chong hugged his arms and showed that incredibly insincere fake smile. He said lazily, if I wanted to hold you down, do you think I'd need to catch them off guard? Ling Wen couldn't speak, but the words in her eyes were clear. Hua Chongzu, have you forgotten? I have already given His Highness an order. And right then, the brocade immortal activated its powers. Shilian turned around abruptly, raised his hand, and lunged towards Hua Chong. An unknown amount of time had passed before Shilian's vision suddenly cleared, and he instantly came to his senses. So long! Hua Chong was standing right before him, and upon his red robe over his heart there was a crushing hand. It was Shilian's hand. Hua Chong didn't dodge the blow at all and only stood there letting Shilian strike full force onto his heart. Shilian hadn't yet come around to react before Hua Chong had firmly gripped his wrist, his voice low. All right. Attack complete. Command release. Sure enough, after Shilian succeeded in his attack, his body felt slackened and his freedom returning. For the sake of releasing Shilian from the command Ling Wen gave, Hua Chong had actually stood there and took the blow without dodging. Once the order was released, Shilian instantly withdrew his hand, his face dropping. It was a moment before he asked, so long, are you hurt? He observed Hua Chong's face closely. However, because Hua Chong wasn't a live human being, his skin was the color of snow that hadn't seen the sun, and no visible changes could be seen at the moment. However, his tone of voice certainly didn't change, and he smiled. Gege is indeed incredible. What a beautiful blow. Shilian's face was dark, like he'd been scared by him. He said solemnly, I wasn't joking around. I used 1/7 of my strength in my hand earlier. Are you really all right? 1/7! Oh my God! When Lingwen gave her order, the word she had used was attack. Typically, when Xilian exchanged blows with people, he never used attack as the reason to make a move. Usually it was self-defense or for holding the other down. So once he moved with attack as the reason, he really wasn't sure what would happen to the other if he was to strike directly. Huachong replied slowly, I wasn't joking. Gege really is incredible. If you weren't wearing those two things on your body, perhaps not even Jun Wu would be your match. Xilian unconsciously touched his neck, and when he felt the cursed shackle, he immediately dropped his hand. Just then, Huachong added, Gege, I have a question for you. What is it? Xilian asked. You had a chance to remove those cursed shackles, Huachong said. Why did you keep those things to bind you? Xilian hadn't expected that he'd ask that question, and he was taken aback. Maybe it was to remind myself of some things, he said. Sanlong, don't change the subject. What kind of bad habit is this? The situation just now, it would have been fine if you just held me down. Why did you have to take the blow yourself? However, Huachong replied, Gege, you knew this is a bad habit too? When it comes to taking a beating, you have no right to lecture me, you know. Oh, really? Xilian said, but the moment the words left his mouth, he felt guilty. It must be known that at the time he fought the fetus spirit in the water, Huachong had caught him red-handed for almost swallowing a sword. Huachong replied, oh, really? Why use other ways if I can solve the problem by taking a beating? Is your bad influence on me? Xilian waved his hand. Well, never mind, Sanlong. Let's not talk about this anymore. Let's look at those robes first. He pulled at the hem of the white robe, feeling extremely woeful. This was just great. The brocade immortal was definitely found, but now they have to think of a way to take it off. Oh, okay. Oh, that's only one chapter. Whew, okay. Chapter 217. Oh, 100 years of pain. 1,000 years of suffering. Oh, awesome. Cool. Great. That's a great chapter name. Should be Sunshine and Rainbows. Since the robe was already being worn, there was definitely no way it could be burnt now, lest Xilian get burnt along with it. Xilian suggested, I'll just keep the robe on me for now. It's not like they can suck my blood, and Lingwen shouldn't be able to give any more commands either. A draft of blue, smoky mist blew by, and where Lingwen had been standing now was only a blue Daruma doll! Oh, its expression was very serious, and there even seemed to be scrolls in its arms. Xilian picked it up and tucked it away in his robes, and the two left the side chamber, sneaking into the main hall. Why not? We'll just take Lingwen with us. Why not, right? Oh my god. It wasn't his imagination. The main hall of the Palace of Lingwen appeared to be much gloomier than before. The mountains of scrolls and reports piled high from the ground up looked to be perilous and dangerous, like they would collapse at any given moment and crush the people below to death. The two didn't run into any guards as they sprinted straight towards the crimson doors in the deep heart of the palace. Before they even got close, Xilian heard a trembling, shocked voice. How is this possible? How could this be? Ah! It was the Guoshi! Could someone have gotten to him before they did? Xilian instantly kicked the door down and growled, "Let him go!" Sure enough, it wasn't only Guoshi alone inside the chamber. After the door was kicked down, everyone turned their heads to look at the new intruders. The shock on the Goshi's face still hadn't faded. Your Highness. Guoshi didn't look up for more than a moment before he lowered his head again. You just wait a second. How could this be? What kind of luck is this? Xilian and Huachong were both speechless. Within the chamber, Guoshi and 3 others formed a full table, and they were in the middle of a heated game of cards. What? Their passionate obsession blinding them from their surroundings. Oh my god, the Guoshi all playing cards! Back from Volume 3! While previously said to be 3 other people, they weren't actually alive. They were roughly crafted paper dolls, very crudely made. Who knows what kind of bizarre spell was cast for them to move, and even play cards. As for Guoshi, his exclamations were just now his only laments after getting his hand of cards. Oh my god, he's just sitting there playing cards like he was back in Volume 3. I thought, were these supposed to be the mountain spirits? Are they, what? Xilian had originally thought that perhaps the Guoshi might suffer torturous interrogation and would look rather ghastly, but he hadn't expected the Guoshi would actually be sitting, still playing cards at a time like this. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The whole scene was incredibly dear. How could it not be dear? Back then, when he and Feng Shen resided in the Royal Holy Pavilion, whenever they went to look for Guoshi, 7 out of 10 times he'd be playing cards. Over 800 years had passed, but seeing once again the Guoshi playing cards, it was as if it was only yesterday. Even the crazed passion on Goshi's face was exactly the same. He stared unblinkingly at the cards in his hands and spoke without looking back. Oh, Your Highness, you're finally come. But let me finish this round first. Xianle knew this was his old habit, rearing its head, of recognizing no one when the game was happening. Compared to him at the Great Martial Hall, they were practically two different people. Really quite the sad sight. Xianle went up to try to drag him away from the table. Master, what time do you think this is? Stop playing! The Guoshi's eyes were red and he yelled, oh, don't let me finish! I'm almost done! Just this round, let me finish this hand! It's almost done! I just might win this time! You won't win! You really won't win! Xianle cried. Thankfully, this round really did finish fairly quickly. While the Guoshi swore he was going to win, in actuality, he did not win. He waved his hand and withdrew the 3 paper dolls. And the Guoshi finally returned to his normal, calm demeanor. He sat poised and said solemnly, Your Highness, I knew you would come. I've been waiting for you. It didn't look like you were waiting for me at all, Xianle thought, but of course he didn't say that out loud, since respect for elders must be maintained. The Guoshi continued, I know you must have many questions. Oh my god, yes! Huachong stood on the side leaning against the door. He looked rather at leisure, but was probably standing guard. Xianle also sat proper and poised before the Guoshi. Yes. After a pause, Xianle asked, First, I want to confirm. Is Jun Wu, is he really White No-Face? And also the Crown Prince of Wuyang? There's no need for doubt. He is, the Guoshi replied. I have no relation whatsoever with the Crown Prince of Wuyang, right? We're two completely different people, Xianle asked. The only relationship you share with the Crown Prince of Wuyang is that he destroyed your kingdom, Xianle. Xianle said softly, but Guoshi, you told me once that you didn't know what White No-Face was, and you were certain he was born because of me. Your Highness, at the time, I genuinely did not know what he was. Guoshi replied, and by the time I found out, it was already too late. And to say he was born because of you was not incorrect. Well, just what exactly does that mean? Xianle asked. And the same question as before, why did he want to destroy Xianle? Guoshi looked him in the eyes. Because of that one phrase you said. Xianle was taken aback. The one phrase I said, what phrase? Body in abyss, heart in paradise. Xianle was speechless for a moment, and he asked incredulously, that's it? That's it, Guoshi said. Just that one line. What's wrong with those words? The Guoshi replied darkly, everything. Everything started with that phrase of yours. Xianle could vaguely tell what the Guoshi was about to say next would be something that he'd have a hard time swallowing. He wanted to call for Huachong, but before he could do so, Huachong had already come forward and sat down next to him. You saw those murals at Mount Tonglu, correct? The Guoshi said, oh, I think that Huachong is next to him, right? Supporting him. Yes, Xianle replied. Were you the one who left those murals behind? Yes, it was me, the Guoshi replied. Every time Mount Tonglu opened its gates, I would sneak in. On one hand, it was to prevent a new ghost king from being born. And on the other, it was to use all manners of ways to leave some sort of clue to tell others about the kingdom of Wuyang and about the crown prince of Wuyang. Well, Xianle wondered solemnly, why not just tell the people directly? Why must you use such a roundabout method? Your Highness, why do you think there's now practically no one in the world who knows about the kingdom of Wuyang? Before Xianle answered, Huachong had spoken up. Everyone who knew has been cleaned away, right? That's right, the Guoshi replied. If the clues left behind were too obvious, or if the word spread directly, it would be in the danger of exposure. Anyone who had seen might vanish from this world. It wouldn't matter how many people, even if it was a city fortress. He could turn it into a flat ground within 3 days. You should know I'm not joking. Of course Xianle knew. And the ironic thing was, he was once thankful that Jun Wu had ascended and became a god instead of fallen into becoming a ghost. Otherwise, the world would fall into chaos. The Guoshi continued, this is why I can't let him notice. There are still people in this world who know about those events. But still, I can't accept the fact that I'm the only one who knows. I thought those who are attentive enough and brave enough would naturally discover the truth. Since I don't know the power to fight him straight on, I'll just go more with the flow. Throughout the years, I've been hiding and running and concealed myself well. Except for that time 800 years ago, I almost couldn't get away. He has never been able to capture me. He was able to this time because he discovered the murals I left behind in the Divine Temple within the Red Forest of Tonglu. Plus, later on, you correctly guessed his identity. And so it occurred to him that I might still be alive, and also left behind many things he didn't want people to know about. Xianle remembered when they were passing through the last Divine Temple within the Red Forest of Tonglu, the last couple of murals, the most important one, were already destroyed by someone. At the time, both he and Huacheng suspected that someone was hidden inside the temple, but they weren't able to find that person. Now that he thought back on it, there was actually a very real possibility that White No-Face was really hidden in some corner within that Divine Temple. But Guoshi, why do you have to keep hiding and running? Of course, it's because betrayal, Huacheng said. The word was a little sharp, and the Guoshi gave him a look. Huacheng's expression did not change. You've betrayed him, right? Pretty much, the Guoshi said. That's about it. He turned to Xianle. How do I say this, Your Highness? Everything told by the murals is all true. The esteemed Highness, the Crown Prince of Wuyang, was like the one and only son of the Kingdom of Wuyang. Back in the day when you were the Crown Prince of Xianle, however glorious you were, he was many times more. Me and my 3 peers, the 4 of us, were once his vassals. After the Crown Prince ascended, he appointed us all up to the heavens, and there we witnessed the many forms and colors of various celestial beings. Without any exaggeration, even within the sea of gods in the heavenly realm, he was like the sun, shining so brightly the others next to him would lose their colors. As the Guoshi spoke, the smallest of smiles appeared unconsciously, just a flash. Xianle felt when he was addressing the others as His Highness, he wasn't talking about Jun Wu, nor the White No-Face, but that Crown Prince 2,000 years prior. I think you've also told me something similar in the past. Have I? When people get old, their memory is bad. You have, but you told me he didn't ascend. You told me that he died. And that's probably because I'd rather he hadn't ascended, the Guoshi said. Was it because the volcano of Mount Tonglu erupted? The Guoshi didn't answer his question, and only said His Highness's spiritual powers were too strong. In his dream, he foresaw the future of Wuyang as a sea of fire. And so he started thinking of ways to save his people. If the me of now was there, I would never have let him do so. But at the time, none of us thought things would turn out the way that they did. We only thought there were people who were going to die, so what's wrong with saving them? But things weren't so simple. It was impossible to stop the volcano from erupting. And if we wanted no one to get hurt, then the only option was to migrate. However, the affected areas were too great. It wasn't just a matter of 1 or 2 city fortresses. To the nobles and the common people, the best way was to invade other kingdoms, take over new land. Otherwise, the other kingdoms wouldn't so easily allow such a great number of people from Wuyang to move in. However, to His Highness, this wasn't an option at all. Blood would be shed in war. And once blood flows, eyes would grow red, people would turn violent, and they would become less than human. Still, the kingdom of Wuyang dispatched troops. Wherever the soldiers went, not a single soul was left alive. Since the objective was to clear land for the future people of Wuyang to move in, the generals had been given an order to slaughter the citizens of other kingdoms. The more the better. Blood flowed like rivers, corpses piled high like mountains. Once His Highness found out, he was very angry. As you all have seen, he descended upon the battlefield and punished those soldiers of Wuyang. When Xianle realized this was about the young Jun Wu and also the young White No-Face, he felt rather intrigued. The Guoshi continued, yet he wasn't the only person who was angry. This whole affair also angered the nobles of Wuyang and some of the people. Many went to the Divine Temple to question His Highness. We only wanted to survive. We needed more land. We only invaded others because we had no choice, so how could we be wrong? The effect of this affair greatly exceeded all of our expectations, and it was becoming more and more serious, with some already calling for the discretion of his status. With the desecration of his statues, the burning of his temples, but His Highness withstood all of it. He said if Wuyang was the one being invaded, he would die defending his kingdom, not allowing the enemy to step a single foot across the border. However, if it was they themselves, they must never invade others. He earnestly requested for everyone to abandon war and wait until he had built something, his heaven-crossing bridge. The Guoshi said slowly, there wasn't any more land in the mortal realm, so let's bring the people up to the heavens to shelter them for a while. While this idea was practically impossible, all 4 of us believed His Highness absolutely, convinced he could do it. Or rather, we would do our utmost to support him in whatever he endeavored. Of course, the other heavenly officials didn't think the same. The entire heavenly realm was against it, but His Highness withstood still. He took on 3 things at once: the ignorance and grumbling complaints of the nobles and people of Wuyong, the incessant outrage of all the gods in heaven, and the giant heaven-crossing bridge. However, Huachong snorted against it. They probably weren't just opposing it. The Guoshi nodded slowly. If it was only mere opposition, it wouldn't have mattered, but... Xilian could vaguely guess what had happened, but he still asked, but... The Guoshi said, the bridge required an enormous amount of time and terrifying spiritual power to fully build, and His Highness couldn't be distracted at all. He had practically stopped going to anywhere else, stopped doing anything else, and stopped listening to the prayers of believers. He could only focus on doing this one thing. However, a god that can only do one thing will never be able to keep followers. The first day he took on that bridge, the people were grateful to him and remembered him. The second day, the third day, the fourth day, they were also the same. A month, 2 months, they were still grateful and remembered him. But as time dragged on, it wouldn't do. The volcano hadn't erupted yet, but His Highness wasn't doing anything else and had been silently storing his powers. The people couldn't help but feel he wasn't as powerful as he once was, that he wasn't as dedicated anymore even. At a time like this, inevitably, a new god would be worshipped. The kingdom of Wuyong was greatly populated, its wealth abundant, and the power of belief of the citizens was quite strong. This was obvious, seeing how His Highness prospered back then. There were many heavenly officials who had long been salivating over this domain and the believers within it. So, Xilian understood. He said, so, the heavenly officials took advantage of this opportunity. They used the resentment and dissatisfaction that people of Wuyong bore from the dissent that the crown prince had to withdraw the troops. They tempted them and divided his believers in the source of his spiritual powers. Right? Oh my God, we're getting answers. And it feels so good. Chapter 218. 100 years of pain. 1,000 years of suffering. Part 2. Electric Boogaloo. It's not that His Highness didn't know about this, but he didn't know what to do about it, the Guoshi said. Xilian inclined his head slightly and commented, well, he's a god. Of course he couldn't say to the devotees, I won't allow you to worship a god other than me. He probably felt disdain for such a command too. Naturally, you understand him very well, the Guoshi said. Xilian added, but this has just had to happen when he couldn't afford to lose devotees and spiritual powers, lest the construction of the heaven-crossing bridge be affected. That's exactly it, the Guoshi said. So it was up to the 4 of us to relay to the people what the stakes were. And how did that go, Xilian asked. Probably nothing remarkable, Huachong said. Nothing remarkable indeed, the Guoshi replied. At least, nothing that met our expectations. Some of the people worried the construction of the bridge might fall apart and returned. But there was a large number who thought instead His Highness was being domineering. Their prayers were not fulfilled, so it couldn't be helped that they turned around to worship other gods that could fulfill their wishes. They were free devotees. They could believe in whatever they wanted to believe. It's all more than natural. It wasn't that he didn't want to please everyone. It's really that he was just... Xilian sighed and whispered, he had the heart, but not the strength. The Guoshi continued, after His Highness learned of this, he stopped us and said that if they wanted to go, then let them go. If they were forcefully kept, they wouldn't be believing in him wholeheartedly anyway. That certainly was the case, and even though we warned them over and over again, the hearts of the devotees had already been dispersed. Even if they forced themselves to come back, they were only placating us. He couldn't be angry at the devotees, and he couldn't request the help of other heavenly officials either, Xilian commented. Even if he went and asked, the other heavenly officials would never help him anyway, the Guoshi said. They were actually willing to give a hand. If they were actually willing to give a hand, then they wouldn't have opposed this in the first place. And they wouldn't have taken advantage of the opportunity to lure away his devotees either. His Highness became more and more silent and closed off, using his own powers to construct that bridge and support it up. I watched him every day, and while he said nothing, I could tell just how much he suffered inside. And this suffering could only be borne by him on his own. No matter how much the 4 of us wanted to help him, we couldn't lighten his burden. Finally, after enduring arduously for 3 years, the volcano was about to erupt. 3 years! Oh my God! 3 years, which is how long Xilian had ascended. The moment the news broke out, the people fought to swarm the bridge. The 4 of us directed the hustling crowd while worrying over His Highness, who was supporting this up all by himself. The Guoshi sighed. In the past, we would never have had to worry he wouldn't be able to do something, but at the time, we actually started worrying. At first, the bridge was still considerably stable. However, when the swarming crowd grew and grew, the time needed to support the bridge became longer and longer, and His Highness's hands started shaking, his face growing paler and paler. No one else could see, only we could see. I sensed that things weren't right and told the people to please wait a moment, to give him a little bit more time and to not swarm towards them all at once. Let him catch his breath. He will definitely save all of you. But the volcano was about to erupt. Lives were in danger and no one was willing to wait. They all rushed onto the bridge like mad. Some were even trampled to death, and we couldn't hold them back at all. In the end, what we feared the most still happened. During those 3 years, because we kept losing devotees, His Highness's spiritual powers were no longer as strong as they once were. As hundreds of thousands of people swarmed that bridge, celebrating their salvation, cheerfully running towards the heavenly realm, the bridge collapsed. Shilian's breath hitched. The Guoshi continued. The heavenly rainbow was ripped. Millions of people, a dense and crammed crowd, suddenly dropped from the sky in an instant, wailing and screaming heart-wrenchingly as they fell into a sea of fire and burnt to ashes right before the eyes of His Highness. I was completely stupefied at the time, and I didn't dare to look at His Highness's face at all. The bridge couldn't be repaired, and the people couldn't be pulled up, and the fires couldn't be extinguished. There was no way to help at all. And there were many more who hadn't yet climbed onto the bridge. They were entombed by lava, sealed by flying ashes, screeching, wailing, cursing. The scene was truly too horrible. I have never seen anything as horrid since. Shilian tried to imagine it, and his heart chilled. The Guoshi continued his tale. The bridge collapsed, and the people of Wuyang went mad. They set fires to burn down His Highness's temple, toppled his divine statues, used blades to pierce his heart until it was mush, cursing that he was a useless creature, a bullshit god. He was a god, and gods should be mighty and strong. Gods couldn't fail. But he did fail. And so, he could no longer be positioned above. The heavenly officials in the heavenly realm had long been waiting for this moment. They said, "We already told you long before that this endeavor was impossible. You caused a huge problem, and now we have to ask you to leave and go back down below." And His Highness asked a very foolish question. He asked, "Why didn't any of you help me?" But why would anyone help him for no good reason? Besides, if they allowed him to successfully pass this enormous calamity for the kingdom of Wuyang, then wouldn't he never again have such a match in the heavenly realm? So that was a very foolish question. I imagine he knew this, yet he still asked. Of course, no one answered him, and His Highness was banished. He had fallen back to the mortal realm, no longer a god, no longer a crown prince. We followed him, and we all told him, "You can definitely ascend again." And so he began cultivating anew, but it was much too difficult, and I'm sure you understand. Of course, Shilian understood. The higher one stood, the harder one fell. After falling from the heavens back to the mortal realm, what awaited him would be endless coldness and maliciousness. The Guoshi continued. The volcano was still blowing, and the kingdom of Wuyang had fallen into a crisis it had never before seen in history. Refugees, riots, the disorder was incessant, and everyone was at the end of their wits. The attitude towards His Highness had changed completely, entirely different than before. Even then, His Highness still wanted to help them. However, another thing just had to happen right then. Many other heavenly officials began to show their grace. Even though they weren't willing to help prevent the volcano from erupting, they were quite happy to grant little blessings, deliver a bit of medicine and food or something. Since at this time His Highness was already banished, what could he do, of course, couldn't be compared to those heavenly officials at all. It was as if the people of Wuyang had suddenly grabbed onto a lifeline, their parents reborn, their devotees were lost even faster. Though in truth, there weren't many left anyway. All the praise and adoration for His Highness from before was all given away to the other heavenly officials without exception. And what was left behind for him was only hate and rejection. The Guoshi closed his eyes. At the time, we really felt betrayed, that everything was so unfair. Those heavenly officials clearly didn't give them that much, and only made appearances after the disaster was over. His Highness was the one who did the most. He gave his all, and he should have been the successful one too. It was just one more step. Why, in the end? It was he who had fallen. Why was the one who had given the most ignored, and those who had given a little were praised and thanked? That was also the time when my thinking began to change. I couldn't help but think if His Highness had chosen to pretend to have never foreseen the future in his dreams from the start, and chose to sit back and observe from under the belief that this is fate, the gods can do naught, and only granted blessings after the volcano erupted like the other heavenly officials, then surely the people would also be crying tears of gratitude for him. Huachong said flatly, "Did you only think that then? You should have thought that from the beginning. Slicing off a piece of flesh to save one person, the person would be grateful. But the more that's sliced, the more the person would demand. In the end, even if all is sliced is nothing to the bones, the person would still not be satisfied." I didn't dare tell him any of these thoughts, the Guoshi said. But His Highness was becoming more and more somber, and I couldn't tell what he was thinking. If he had thought the same things. Day after day, the volcano was still blowing unceasingly, and all the kingdom of Wuyang was sunken in terror, unable to escape. No one knew how to make it stop, to end this nightmare. But one day, His Highness suddenly said to us that he'd found a way to make the volcano stop. When he told us this method, we had a huge fight, however. "Let me guess," Huachong said, "that method is to sacrifice the living." "Correct," the Guoshi said. "His Highness said find a batch of bad people. Use those fiends as a sacrifice. Throw them into the kiln to pacify its fires of fury." The four of us all had different thoughts on this, but the general consensus was disagreement. Something like this must never be done. In the beginning, His Highness didn't want Wuyong to use a force to invade other kingdoms, precisely because he didn't want us to use a life to save a life. If we were to choose this sacrifice, to sacrifice the living to the kiln, then how is this any different? It'd be even worse. In fact, there were a couple who were extremely opposed to the idea and directly had a huge quarrel with His Highness. The quarrel was too great, and they even used their fists. I was against it too at first, but compared to the attacks from the outside, it was harder for me to withstand having internal quarrels. You must know, the four of us had always supported His Highness, but now we are his only pillar of support. Yet at the time, not only were blows exchanged in the heat of the moment, someone even accused His Highness that he'd changed, that he'd forgotten his heart, and he was no longer the Highness of the past. Those words truly executed the heart. I couldn't stand it. If even we stood against His Highness to berate him, then there was truly no one in this world who stood by his side. So in the end, I didn't disagree, and only told him to let it go, to stop minding those affairs. The heavenly realm, the mortal realm, all the refugees, stop caring for everything. It really was too tiresome. But no one listened to me. After that huge fight, besides me, the other three all left. Shilian shook his head, not knowing what to say. Only to leave at a time like this, it was adding frost to snow. Only I stayed behind, the Guoshi said. His Highness didn't say much either and only asked me, "Are you leaving?" To see the expression on his face of the once prince when he asked me this question. At that moment, I genuinely felt even if he did throw people into the kiln as a sacrifice, I could understand. I said, "Your Highness, I won't leave." His Highness didn't say much, but he never mentioned using live sacrifices again and changed his mind. He set up a ritual near the kiln, and I went with him, enduring the cursing and thrown rocks from the refugees. We conducted services, trying to push down the fury of the volcano. I thought the affair was over, just like that. Yet who knew one day I discovered something that chilled me to the bones. Having spoken to this point, the Guoshi's face had turned terrifying, as if he was once again seeing the same image that chilled him. Shilian's heart also felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand, and he asked, "What was it?" He suddenly started covering his own face, the Guoshi said. His Highness is handsome in appearance and never hid his face, the Guoshi said, and there wasn't anything that could injure his face. It had been so many years I'd never seen him like this. I was perplexed. I asked him, "Your Highness, what's happened to your face?" He said he was accidentally burnt by a fire. I didn't know when he had suffered this injury at all, and he wouldn't let me examine the wounds, only applying some herbs on his own. His whereabouts suddenly became unpredictable. That was unusual, but then a great thing happened and temporarily distracted my attention. The volcano suddenly began to calm. The kiln returned to its dead silence and gradually settled, and after a while it stopped blowing completely. Since it was only His Highness who had worked hard on this, many people of Wuyang thought it was him who had pushed the volcano down and began to worship him anew. His Highness's path to cultivation also became more successful. At least there weren't any more people shaming him or throwing rocks, and the people gradually started smiling at him again. Still, I always thought that there was something not right. There were many things not right. While my 3 friends had all different personalities, I at least knew them, and I knew they wouldn't have really just left like that without a care. Even if they were really angry against His Highness, they wouldn't be angry with me too. At the very least, they wouldn't have stopped all communication with me. Oh. What was most unusual was His Highness's face. He kept on using something to cover his own face. At first it was rags and mantles, and then later he started wearing a mask, and he wouldn't remove it for any reason. At the time I was even more suspicious, oh my God, as to whether this person was even His Highness versus an impersonator. The way he spoke and acted, even his personality completely changed. Sometimes it was kind and dear. Sometimes it was abruptly enraged. There was an incident where he was in the house by himself and he smashed all the mirrors. Who knows where the blood was flowing from, but everything was bloody. And what was more horrifying was I would often hear strange voices. Oh my God, in Jun Wu in the mirror, when he looked back, there was 3 faces. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, no. What voices, Shilian asked. Sometimes deep in the night, there would be human voices coming from His Highness's room, like a few people were whispering and arguing. But when I'd go in to check, there was only him inside the room. After this happened a few times, His Highness stopped allowing me into his room. Oh my God! Oh no! One night, I heard those strange voices again, and this time I noticed. They sounded like the voices of my 3 friends. I really couldn't hold back anymore, and I thought, could they have perhaps snuck back? Why would they hide this from me? So I got up and ran into His Highness's room. What was strange was there really was no one else inside the room. There was only His Highness lying on the bed, his mask still unremoved. I then stood there and listened for a moment, and I heard those voices again, and they seemed to all be coming from His Highness. Or more accurately, it was coming from under the mask. Oh my God, no! I'm back when we saw Jun Wu in the picture of the mask with thing. It was like his face, and there was like 3 faces erupting from the... Oh, shit, no. I slowly walked to His Highness's bedside, and the closer I got, the more I was certain that the voices were really coming from underneath the mask. Was His Highness sleep-talking? Could he have missed his friends so much that he had learned their voices in his dreams? I hesitated for a long time, and in that time, His Highness had never moved. I figured he was asleep. So I gently and lightly took off the mask on his face, and then I saw something. Inconceivable terror flowed from Guoshi's eyes. He said, I saw my 3 friends. The one talking wasn't His Highness, it was them. Upon His Highness's face were messy gashes from some sharp weapon. His flesh overturned, blood half dried, and since who knows when, there grew 3 more faces, their mouths all moving, opening and closing. It was their faces. Shilian shuddered. He threw the 3 vassals who left him into the kiln too. Oh God, chapter 219. 100 years of pain, thousands years of suffering, part 3. Well, Guoshi didn't answer him. He was now completely sunken into that indispellable terror that scene still brought him. Those faces hadn't seen light in a long time, he said. So even the moonlight of the night was painful to them. When I suddenly removed the mask, it was as if they were shocked, and they squinted their eyes, their voices stopping. But after a moment, when they saw it was me, they began to scream my name. I was completely stunned. I said earlier I'd never seen anything more horrific than millions of people falling from the skies and burning alive in a sea of fire. But the scene before my eyes was more horrifying than that by a millionfold. My hand that was holding the mask was shaking nonstop, and if it wasn't for my entire person being already petrified and frozen still, that mask would have probably dropped to the ground and woken His Highness. Meanwhile, those 3 faces seemed to be anxious to tell me something. Their opening and closing of their mouths became even more erratic, but still they suppressed their voices, like they were afraid to wake His Highness. When I saw their appearance, I was both disgusted and scared. But I still couldn't help but be curious to find out what they wanted to tell me. So I bent down, held my breath, and leaned close to His Highness's face to listen. Coming so close, I could smell the thick stench of blood and the rot that the medicinal herbs couldn't conceal. I heard them say, "Quick, run away. His Highness has gone mad." It turns out After the other three had left, they were still worried, so they secretly returned to find His Highness. Yet unexpectedly, they just happened to run into His Highness rushing a large number of people towards the direction of the kiln. Only then did they find out that His Highness had never abandoned the idea of sacrificing the living. In a fit of shock and rage, they went to stop him and started a fight with His Highness, yet unexpectedly His Highness actually bore down and killed them, and threw them into the kiln along with the others. The other citizens were of course burnt to dust and ashes after being thrown in. But the three of them were cultivated and were also murdered by His Highness, so their resentful attachment was extremely deep. So their souls actually took his body as a host, growing upon his person, and nagged at him in rage every day, hoping to prevent him from pursuing the terrible endeavors. As I listened, I felt horror and confusion. I didn't know what to do at all. What was most horrifying about the situation was that I wasn't actually clear. His Highness was scary. Was His Highness scarier, or those three things on his face? And right then I felt a hand rest on my head. I stiffened and slowly looked up and saw His Highness. I don't know when he had woken. He and the three faces on his face, a total of 4 sets of eyes, were staring at me. Oh my God! The expression on those human faces became even more exaggerated. As they twisted, they tore at the gash on his face and blood streamed down. He stared at me for a long, long time, and then he sighed. Haven't I told you not to come in here? Suddenly, I understood all the abnormal behavior these past few days. When His Highness discovered his face had grown 3 such creatures, he wasn't able to accept it. He couldn't tolerate this inhuman, demonic appearance in the mirror, so he smashed all of them. The bleeding was because he wanted to use a blade to slice them off. This rotting smell because the injuries wouldn't heal. And no matter how many times he cut them, they would always grow back. The Guoshi covered half his face, his pupils violently shrinking. He said, I instantly fell to my knees at his bedside. His Highness slowly sat up on the bed and said, don't be afraid. They become like this because they betrayed me. As long as you don't do the same, I'll still treat you as before. As long as you are my loyal servant, nothing will change. But how could I not be afraid? And how could nothing be changed? Everything had changed. His Highness was very smart. He had never had to watch people's faces, but after banishment, he had learned to observe expressions. He had guessed what I was thinking, and he asked me slowly, are you leaving too? To be honest, I didn't know. If he had only thrown the fiends he spoke of into the kiln, maybe I could have pretended nothing had happened. And I did say I could understand, but he had personally killed and thrown our best friends into the kiln. We only had each other. This really was madness. I wasn't able to accept it. His Highness said to himself, it's okay. I had expected it. No one would stay after I'd become like this. I can go on my own. I understand now. I've always been alone. I don't need anyone. His expression suddenly turned savage, and he stared at me unblinkingly as he strangled me with one hand, repeating nonstop, I can be on my own. All alone. Alone, 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 alone. I don't need anyone. I don't need anyone. I don't need anyone. I don't need anyone. His Highness's strength is powerful. If he really wanted to kill me, my neck should have been snapped instantly without making a sound. But I didn't immediately die. And when he started to act up, my 3 friends all started screaming from his face, as if they'd done something to him. He started yelling from an agonizing headache, and I was also screaming. The 5 of us were all screaming wildly, yelling in madness like we'd all gone crazy. His Highness gripped his own head with one hand, and the other was strangling me harder. My vision was growing dark, and I couldn't hold on much longer, but right then, I saw something underneath his pillow. Under his pillow was a sword. It was cushioned underneath when he slept, and it was a habit he developed after banishment. I caught hold of the hilt and I pulled out the sword, and the chilling light shimmered, and His Highness laughed heartily. His eyes blood red, and he asked, are you going to kill me too? Come, stab me quick, stab me right in the heart. You can add to the count. I've got to see who will be the last to die, you lot or me. Of course I didn't stab him. I only flashed the sword before him and cried with everything, Your Highness, please come back. Look at yourself. Look at what you've become. He had smashed all the mirrors, and it had been a long time since he last looked at his own reflection. The blade of that sword was sharp and bright, and it reflected his appearance then, and he also saw his own face. When he saw himself in the mirror, he suddenly stopped. The strength His Highness used to strangle me did not lessen, but after who knows how long he looked, and suddenly 2 lines of tears streamed from his eyes. When I saw his tears, I couldn't help but cry too. The reflection on the sword, such ugliness. Even with just a glance, I found it disgusting, so why did I make him look at himself like this, to remind him that he was now such an ugly creature? I still couldn't bear it, and the sword fell from my hand, dropping to the ground. In the end, His Highness threw me away forcefully and said, "Scram." And I ran away, crawling and stumbling. Having listened to this point in one go, that breath held in Shilian's throat finally let go some. The Guoshi also lowered his hands. I ran far away and escaped the kingdom of Wuyong. And it wasn't long before the volcano of the kiln erupted once again. This time, the entire kingdom of Wuyong was completely buried. Not a single soul saved. An entire country disappeared just like that. I escaped this calamity, but afterward, I never heard any news of His Highness again. It was as if he had been buried along with the kingdom of Wuyong. I've trekked to the heavens before, and I've also cultivated my own, so I've some achievements. I maintained the state of my body, and I drifted aimlessly throughout the mortal realm. I had served His Highness since I was young, and now that I didn't need to serve him any longer, I actually didn't know what to do. His Highness was gone. My 3 friends were also dead. I created 3 empty-shelled fakes, and I made the fakes speak in their voices to talk to me and play cards sometimes. Having heard empty-shelled fakes, Shilian's expression grew solemn. The Guoshi continued, "Later, my magic improved, so I instilled the skills of my 3 friends into the fakes." Shilian asked softly, "Were they the other 3 Guoshi?" No wonder he always thought that the other 3 Guoshi were rather strange. They never acted on their own, they never socialized with him one-on-one either, so they were fakes. And they left Goshi's side, and if they left the Guoshi's side, they would have been exposed. The Guoshi replied, "It's them. So suppose you are also the disciple of my 3 friends. Alas, I'm not them after all." The skill I could instill into the fakes was only 20 or 30% of their true strength, so not much could be taught. And those 3 fakes that had kept me company for so long had also been destroyed by him too. After another 1 or 2 centuries, the heavenly dynasty changed, and the heavenly officials of the past were all fading away. Gradually, a new batch of heavenly officials replaced them. However, none of that was any of my business, and I was just living, shamelessly waiting for death. Until one day, in some kingdom, a crown prince was born under the ominous star, and that was you, the crown prince of the kingdom of Xianle. It was here at last. The hands of Shilian rested on his thighs and clenched slightly. Guoshi sat cross-legged and spoke, hugging his arms. I thought it was quite coincidental, very much an affinity, but in truth, by then Wuyong had been destroyed for many, many years. Of course, there'd be 1 or 2 after some hundreds of years, so it wasn't really a coincidence at all, but still, with a feeling even I didn't understand, I casually made up a name and went and became the Guoshi of Xianle. I knew that name was made up, Shilian said. I thought, "No offense to your Xianle," Guoshi said, "but to muddle in and get the Guoshi position was much too easy for me. There was only one problem, and that was that people always thought that without a beard, one is incapable. Those who were young must be inexperienced and incompetent and would be looked down upon. If I went to interview with my current face, I might not pass, so I changed my face a little and added some 10, 20 years. And sure enough, I muddled right in. But to be the Guoshi, it meant I had to speak to the heavenly officials of the heavenly realm directly. And thus, I came face to face with Jun Wu. Jun Wu's appearance and that of the highness that I knew was completely different. Still, I was too familiar with him after all. After exchanging words a few times, I already had my suspicions. But they were still only suspicions, and even if I was suspicious, I didn't want to expose anything. He had already turned into someone else completely. And the faces on his face had also vanished. I thought the resentment of my 3 friends had dispersed, and if that was the case, then there was no need to bring up any old history and break this peace. So wasn't it fine if we both pretended to have not recognized each other? If it was me, I probably would have done the same, Shilian said. But we still can pretend to the end, Guoshi said, because we both saw you. Your Highness, you must have guessed by now why I had such high hopes for you. You're very much like him. So I'd hoped you would become someone like the god that he had wanted to become, and do what he couldn't do. You could use your perfection to remedy our regrets. Hua Chang, however, said flatly, well, you've been mistaken from the start. They're not alike at all. The Guoshi gave him a look and said, well, of course you'd say that they aren't similar now, but back then they were very much alike. And the bad thing was they were too much alike. He turned to Shilian again. That time at the God-pleasing ceremony, you saved a small child from the fallen city wall, and I wasn't too pleased. It wasn't just because the incident stopped the ceremony. It was more so because that incident was too conspicuous. You had aroused Jun Wu's attention. Jun Wu started talking to me about you. He was very interested in you, and every time we spoke of you, I could vaguely tell there was something not right. But I could tell he genuinely liked you. It was the delight of having found a suitable good sprout, and he was thinking of appointing you up. Only every time I'd use all sorts of reasons to urge him not to do so. Shilian didn't want to believe that Jun Wu's affection towards him was all fake, but when he heard the Guoshi confirm to be sincere, his feelings became complicated and hard to describe. The turning point was Yinian Bridge, Guoshi said. Having heard those 3 words, Shilian snapped back to attention. The Guoshi said, do you remember that ghost at Yinian Bridge? Shilian replied quietly, that was my chance at ascension. Of course I remember. I had already sensed something was wrong when you ran into that ghost, the Guoshi said. This ghost haunted a broken bridge in the barren wild, was donned in broken armor, the flames of karma beneath his feet, the blood and sharp weapons covered his body, leaving footprints of blood and flames behind him with every step. And those 3 questions it asked you. All of that made me very concerned, worried even, and I couldn't quite put my finger on what was wrong. And after defeating the ghost at the bridge, you ascended so quickly, I didn't have the chance to figure things out. Thankfully, after you ascended, Jun Wu's attitude towards you was as good as always, granting you favors, thinking very highly of you like nothing had changed. So I also told myself not to think too much. And then, it was the great drought of Xianle, the rebellion of Yong'an, and the appearance of that creature White No-Face. Shilian held his breath and was hanging on to every word. Guoshi said, I said so before, but at first I didn't know what that creature was at all. Even if the human face disease had manifested, I only had suspicions, since parasitic, resentful spirits weren't anything new. It just never so widely spread before. Plus, I was fairly resentful towards fate, so in the beginning I thought White No-Face was born of nature, that it was the heavens that wanted to punish you. But as you came more and more into contact with that creature, and the human face disease was getting more and more out of control, plus many, many things on top of that, all of it was forcing me to think of the worst case scenario. Many, many other things, Shilian said. What do you mean, such as? That family of 3 who fell to their deaths at the gates of the royal capital of Xianle. That was... Afterwards, I examined the corpses of those 3 people, and I discovered they weren't human at all, but 3 empty shells. But empty shells are hollow. They don't have any organs and they can't bleed. There wasn't any need for organs, the Guoshi said. Falling from such a height, the innards would of course be damaged. Just stuff some mushed flesh in the belly of empty shells and pour in some bloody fluids and that'll suffice. Among my 3 friends, there was one who was an expert in creating such crafty things. The technique to craft empty-shelled fakes was his creation from the start. He only taught the skill to us. The method to create empty-shelled fakes wasn't as widespread then, so since my friends were all dead, who do you think could make such a realistic empty-shelled fakes other than me? Shilian hung his head and his pupils shrunken. That family of 3 who fell to their death before the gates of the royal capital of Xianle was a direct catalyst of the war. And the lives weren't real at all, they were a trap! Then, why didn't you tell me all at the time? Shilian questioned. I didn't dare to, the Guoshi said. If it was him and I told you, then with your personality back then, wouldn't you have charged right up there for vengeance? That wouldn't have saved you or Xianle at all and would have only hastened your annihilation. Besides, even without those 3 empty shells, there would sooner or later be some other incidents that would spark war. Just like that missing dog inside the capital. Later, you were defeated. Xianle was also defeated. I really couldn't hold back any longer, thus I first sent away everyone at the Royal Holy Pavilion, and then requested for his grace inside the Great Martial Temple. And then I unmasked him directly. This was what Jun Wu had mentioned, their meeting of 800 years ago. Guoshi said, I questioned him on a lot of things, but he wouldn't admit or deny anything. And finally I asked him, Your Highness, just what exactly do you want? He finally answered. He said that he wants you to become his perfect successor. If there was anyone in the world who could understand him completely, it was you. And once he succeeded, then you would never betray him. I understood his intention. In the heat of the argument, we started fighting with our fists. I can't fight at all, and if I should, then I would die without a doubt. He could kill me without moving a single finger, but right then his expression suddenly changed, and he covered his face. I was startled, and only then did I notice upon his face were those 3 faces surfacing again. It turns out they didn't vanish at all, and he'd been suppressing them with his spiritual powers. And now, for some reason, perhaps it was because of his high emotions, or because of me, they had come out once again. Just like that, my 3 friends came out to stir up a riot, causing him agonizing headaches, his expression terrifying. I once again used that chance to run away. I started drifting in the mortal realm once again, and this time I had to hide all over the place too. I wondered just how were things where the kingdom of Wuyong stood back then. Thus, I returned to look. What I hadn't imagined was, this time when I returned, I would make great discoveries. For some reason, the land that belonged to the past kingdom of Wuyong was sealed completely, isolated from the outside world. I walked for a long time in that land and ran into my 3 friends again. Were those the 3 mountain spirits, old age, sickness, and death? Xianle said. Correct. The Guoshi replied. The kiln devoured their bodies, and the ashes of their bones that were burnt to nothingness mixed with the ashes of the volcano and were blown out. With time, more and more residue layered. After 1,000 years, they had transformed into 3 large mountains, with parts of their soul resting within. Finding ways to communicate with the friends who had become mountain spirits took me a very long time, but I succeeded. I learned many things. Turns out the previous dynasty of heavenly officials didn't fade away naturally. Instead, they were killed slowly, one by him. He slaughtered the heavenly court, leaving no one behind. Oh my God! Theory time! After washing the heavenly realm with blood, he returned to the mortal realm once again. He patiently waited for a time, changed to a new name, forged a new identity, became a mortal man, and then ascended. All of the previous heavenly officials of the heavenly realm were dead. No one knew exactly who he was, and no one knew what he looked like before. The widespread backstory of the heavenly martial emperor in the mortal realm, his background, his literary references, his interesting hearsays, appearance, character, it's all fake. They're all intricate lies he fabricated. This heavenly capital is the new heavenly realm he single-handedly created that's completely under his control. As for the corpses and ashes of the heavenly officials of the previous dynasty, they're all mixed into the foundation of this heavenly capital, trampled and stepped on by him each and every day. Right now, perhaps there's also someone beneath your feet. What in the world? MXTX! The Guoshi continued. The him of now is the #1 martial god of the heavenly realm, looking glorious and scintillating on the surface. However, in his heart, an infinite darkness is suppressed deep within. Resentment, pain, anger, hatred, those things needed release. Only then could he maintain balance within himself and continue to be the #1 martial god who ruled all 3 realms without murdering everything. The once kingdom of Wuyong had turned into hell, and the kiln had been fed with countless numbers of living and 3 former heavenly officials, so it already recognized him as the master. Thus, he would regularly release those dark emotions within the kiln, using millions of deceased souls of Wuyong as kindling to start the flames of karma, and forged many malicious things. The method in forming those malicious things is different than creating a supreme, right? Xianle asked. Indeed, the Guoshi replied. Supremes were something that came later, since he changed the refining method. What do you mean by that? Xianle asked. The quality and quantity. The Guoshi said, and he gave Huachong another look. You both must know already that a supreme is only born once every 100 years, once every several hundred years even. So they are extremely rare, and the difficulty in their creation is also immense. And the past life of the supreme is an independent existence. The kiln only provides an environment to increase the process of their explosive birth. Those who can become supremes anywhere, and would become supreme sooner or later. In fact, the word supreme was extracted from the meaning of peerless and top. It doesn't have much connection with whether one has trained inside the kiln. Still, to be able to endure the refining of the kiln would certainly make one such an entity, since there aren't that many who could suffer through in the first place. Up until now, aren't there only 3? Shilian glanced at Hua Chong, who was right next to him, and it just so happened Hua Chong was also looking at him. Although he didn't know why Shilian looked over, he still smiled. Guoshi continued. However, the earlier productions of the kiln weren't like this. In the earlier days, there'd be a session once every few years, and each time the results would be different as batches and batches poured in. Perhaps this had something to do with the unstable emotions. With his unstable emotions, everything produced were monsters forged by his hatred and resentment, and there are probably a few familiar names among them. For example, the Reverend of Empty Words. The Reverend of Empty Words was something born of the kiln? Correct. Those creatures, some have their own consciousness and broke away from him, some don't. And they could be considered his clones. Oh my God! The Reverend of Empty Words has its own consciousness, and after it left, it even divided itself into many smaller clones. My 3 friends guarded the borders of the Kingdom of Wuyan to prevent those things from leaving the ward, while I spent my years on the outside searching for those creatures, trying to fix the situation. Shilian suddenly recalled the strange attitude that Guoshi had said when he saw Shi Qingshang. Master! Lord Windmaster, the skilled fortune-telling master who told Shi Qingshang's fortune back then. The one who told his family not to host feasts. Was that you? Duh! The Guoshi said! Other than your master, me, which other skilled fortune-telling master could be so accurate? Which fortune-telling master could be so free that a bowl of porridge could pay for a session? That Reverend of Empty Words had wanted to try and devour the young Shi Wudu at first. But Shi Wudu, that little bastard, was too vicious. Difficult to deal with, even at such a young age. Nothing could get to him, and he was afraid of nothing, his fate so tyrannical it couldn't be swallowed. If it tried to bite forcibly, it just might crack all of its teeth in a bloody mess, so it could only turn to his common little brother with a fate of wealth. Although it still didn't manage to bite, it caused so much grief that the 2 brothers couldn't live in peace. Plus, it bit one who originally had the fate to ascend, so it wasn't aggrieved. That I didn't kill that thing dead really gets to me. Well, it's already been killed dead, Hua Chong said! Devoured by Hashan, right? Guoshi said, I've heard. I was going to watch over the Shi brothers until everything blew over, but at the time the kiln was about to open its gates. Oh my God! So I couldn't follow them closely for long before I had to return to the kiln, and by the time I came back, things were already a mess. Shi Wudu had turned to wickedness and caused a huge havoc completely out of hand. It gave me such a headache. Even if I wanted to care, I couldn't at that point. It really did turn into something that couldn't have been minded even if you wanted to. The Guoshi added, but truth be told, the Reverend of Empty Words wasn't even considered anything particularly powerful among those monsters. It just likes to go stir up trouble. Strictly speaking, it could only be considered a defective product, not even remarkable. There were more, such as, Shilian said quietly, such as the soul of the one who died at the Battle of Yanian Bridge. It was him. Otherwise, why do you think I'd say everything started because of your one phrase? That ghost at the bridge was a black clone he forged out of the kiln. Every so many years it had come out to haunt and kill and vent its hatred, but you had to defeat that monster. He could sense that the ghost at the bridge was killed by someone, so he descended immediately to see, and he saw you. And you just had to say that phrase to his face. Body in abyss, heart in paradise. This was a mad jab at him, a fatal blow. This was the turning point of everything. Oh my God! What? I know, my dogs. Y'all, I'm gonna need a minute. Just wipe it all off. Just wipe half of the whole thing off. Oh my gosh! Ah! I had to go collect myself. And it's cold, so I had to put this on over my shoulders. Collect myself, and then it did no good because I'm still freaking out. Oh yeah, this chunk. Bye. MXTX, make up your mind. I love that MXTX is like, oh, well, you've been bitching for the last 100 or so pages. Like, we're on page 229 is where this chapter ends. They're like, you've been bitching the last 100 pages that I've not been giving you answers. I've been dragging you along, and we've been dodging and going around about the questions. Well, fine. Here's 4 chapters where you get 90% of the answers. Happy? Yes! But I had just resigned myself when I started these chapters. I'm like, well, we're going to deal with the Brocade Immortal, and then we're probably going to go back to Mooching, or we're going to go to Function, or do something, and we're not going to find out to Volume 8. Nope! MXTX is like, gotcha. And at this point, we've got like, I have 3 more weeks with this volume. So we have 3 more weeks with this volume. We've got about a third or more left. So that seems about right. So yeah, we find our answers in this volume. We're getting all the answers about Wu Yang. We're getting everything. The whole 9 yards. Here's all the back. God, Manhua Chapter. Manhua Chapter is just like, all right. I love that it was that easy. I just love that Manhua Chapter's sitting there playing rummy, and they're like, I'm like, okay, you want to know everything? Fine, sit down. I got like an hour's worth to tell you. Oh my God. And the crazy thing is that, you know, Jun Wu is none the wiser because Ling Wen is so reliable. And Jun Wu's thinking, well, if anybody's bothering the Brocade Immortal or Ling Wen, then I'll know about it. But they managed to outsmart her for a hot second. And it's like, okay, well, of course Jun Wu wouldn't be suspect. So, oh my God. So I just felt like my brain was just overloaded with everything. I was like, we're going through the backstory, and I'm like, yes, all right. With these theory time has been great. Romania's theory time has been actually on point. We're doing wonderful. And then some things are revealed that I'm like, oh my God, wait, what? From the moment, because I was like, oh, the 3 friends, well, they're the mountain spirits. We've thought about that for a while now. But the moment that they were talking about, I'll tell y'all in the moment, I was like, oh my God, because it hit me. The image that we saw of Jun Wu with the face in the sword, the moment, it's like on page 108, the moment you see that, there are 3 faces on that, and there's always been like a tie to those faces, but yeah, we've seen the 3 faces on his face, that they're all, like, you can kind of see there, you see a face there, a face there, and a face there. There's 3 at the time, and I was like, oh, okay. And so then, which whatever the human face is, there's 3 faces on his face. He's the origin of it. And then when they were talking about the 3 friends leaving and hearing the voices, I was like, oh my God, they're the 3 faces and they're on him. Holy shit. And so now we're getting into, the Guoshi's getting into some interesting things, but we're going to talk about it. I am so happy that Xianle is not related to Jun Wu, that they're not spiritually connected, that it just, Xianle's circumstances are so similar, and he's such a similar person to Jun Wu, that's why Jun Wu took an interest in him. And it's like, I'm glad we got that confirmed. I'm glad we've got some things confirmed. Lots of things going on we're going to talk about, but oh my God. Like, so many things. So many things. So many things we're going to get to wipe off this board. I'm so excited. We're finally getting there. Yeah, so we're going to talk about these as we go. Hua Chang in the ring, not being brought up. The not Fu Yao. Function and Mooching not being brought up. Who said the Banyu puppet? Well, at this point, here's the thing. They talked about the puppets, which, God, talk about that. But yeah, the fake puppets they were talking about don't quite seem like the Banyu puppets. So they're talking about how Jun Wu could create the puppets that were like what the one Guoshi used to create. They were like a master of the fake shells. I don't think the Banyu puppet was exactly like the ones that were of the family, but that could be a tie to the fact that Jun Wu created the puppet. Could be a sign. I'm hoping that next chapter set we find out about the puppet from Banyu. I'm hoping that that is the case. If you think I'm waiting to read the next chapter set when there's not a Manhua chapter out, oh no. I'm not waiting. I'm going to read that like ASAP. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but in a couple days I'm going to be like, let's get on this. Yes. No. I might wait for some comments, but that's about it. Otherwise, I'm gonna be like, let's go, let's do this. But yeah, so we don't exactly know about the puppet. That's still the 500 years banishment and third ascension. Not clear about that. Got a lot of time. The fetus spirit origin, I feel like we're getting close to finding that out. We're gonna find it out by the end. That's fine. Wuyong things. We're just gonna slowly erase this. Not a problem. Don't worry about it. You didn't see anything here. It's all good. No big deal. But yeah, oh my god, all the Wuyong stuff is just like a little thing. We got everything in this chapter. It was just like MXTX, like, you want exposition dump? Here you go. Oh my god. Huh. So yeah, we know about Manhua Chapter. Know about him. Go talk about him. I really like his character. When his character was like, duh! What a diva. I love him. I love Manhua Chapter. He's great. The murals and the mountain spirits, found out all that. That's crazy as shit. Jun Wu is the Prince of Wuyong and is Bai Wusheng. Glad it's confirmed. Glad it's done. Glad it's confirmed. We can let it go. What I do like is that MXTX does not fully give us the explanation of how Bai Wusheng and Jun Wu got to that point. And now we have an explanation about what Bai Wusheng is. Oh my god. So we're going to talk about that too. The origins and backstory. All of these things. Look at this. Is Yin Yu alive in the curse shackle? Well, we don't know a lot about that yet. Don't really know about, we think he's dead. Who knows? And then Pei Ming, all these people. We kind of got where Ling Wen is. Ling Wen's a Daruma doll now. Talk about that. I love that that's Hua Chong's solution to everything. And just turn it into a doll. It was great. But yeah. Oh my god. Oh. Y'all. what the fudge? Okay. So we're going to I'm going to move all this up because now this big old gap, this giant Wuyong lava flow gap has been created. But we're going to talk about this because I'm so happy to finally get exposition and get things confirmed. It is a big relief, but there is still yet a lot of mystery surrounding this. So let's just talk about this, and I'll move all that up later. About this, we don't really get, the one thing that is not revealed to us is none of the robes worked on Hua Chong. And then the robe didn't work with Xianle, which I guess we do get an explanation for, but it's still rather mysterious, right? I guess the explanation is none of them were the Brocade Immortal. The Brocade Immortal had snuck out on its own accord and had gotten into Xianle's robes and did that, oddly enough. What a random, weird thing to do. What I love is that Hua Chong, here's the weird thing. Okay. We might as well I was going to wait till we got into the end of the chapter, but I'm going to go ahead and put it up here because it is a bit weird. And when we get back to the end of this chapter set, we'll come and tie back to it. But there is this idea that Jun Wu is essentially the Prince of Wuyong, right? He is essentially the Prince of Wuyong that forged a new quote unquote face, a new story about himself. He got his whole new set of devotees and then just slowly killed all the other heavenly officials. No big deal. We'll talk about him in a little bit. But he basically but it is him. The three friends are still on his face. And we're going to talk about that. Let me tell you. So we're going to talk about that. Right? Okay. But Bai Wusheng essentially is a clone of him, right? He talks about how part of to keep his appearance as the Heavenly Emperor, to keep this, calm, cool demeanor. Every couple of years, he's just got to blow off some steam. In the world of, there's a sexual reference there, I know. You all will probably make it. He's got to go to Mount Tonglu, stay there a little bit, and then relieve himself, and then he feels better. But yeah, so basically keeps his appearance. He has to literally blow off some steam. Blow off some steam at the kiln. every so often. And at first, it was just creating these evil creatures. Like, all of his negativity would give birth to evil creatures like the Reverend of Empty Words, or like the Yinian Bridge clone, which is what Xianle fought, which is kind of crazy because all of these creatures have some kind of connection to him. So they have some kind of connection to him. And so he can kind of sense where they are and what happens. And that's how he noticed Xianle when he fought the Yinian Bridge, right? But as time went on, he refined his methods. And again, we're going to revisit this when we get to the chapter to double check myself. He refined his methods, and that was part of the whole thing with the Supreme, which we'll talk about the Supreme thing, because they make it, the Guoshi says some interesting things about that, right? He makes the Supreme. And so the Bai Wuxiang is indeed a Supreme, but it is born, it's kind of like the soul splitting in a way, right? It's born of his resentful spirit and takes this form. That's why Jun Wu can still be in the heavens and Bai Wuxiang is its own entity. Bai Wuxiang is literally a copy of Jun Wu and all of his negativity. It just has formed. They talk about it in the episode about some of these resentful spirits forming their own consciousness, right? The Reverend of Empty Words forged its own consciousness. It just wasn't that strong, and Hashan ended up eating it, right? And so then the Bai Wuxiang is one that has its own consciousness. So it's just like formed of all of Jun Wu's negativity. Huzzah! And it's just taken on its own form. Okay, that explains a lot. And that makes 1,000 times more sense. I feel like next episode we're going to get even more about it. So I'm like, okay, good. But the thing that's weird, though, is it suggesting that Hashan and Huachong, do they contain some of like Jun Wu's evil essence in them? Is that a thing? The moment he was talking about that at the end, because if Hashan has ate the Reverend of Empty Words, then technically, yes, Hashan has, for better or worse, the best way you can say it is he's got part of Jun Wu inside of him. I guess so, right? That's part of his evil, like, residence. So then the question is, when Huachong became a Supreme, is he the same way? I don't know, right? That would be rather interesting in the sense that it would suggest that both Huachong and Xianle have, like, some affinity in their, like, relationship or in their design to Jun Wu, whether Huachong wants to recognize it or not. I don't know. But we're going to talk about how that might not be the case at the very end of the chapter. But that's still very weird. Again, they don't really acknowledge it in this episode. They kind of just like talk it off and like, eh. But I feel like next week they're going to talk more about it, hopefully. Or MXTX next week will just be like, hey, I wonder what Muqing's doing. And we'll just abandon the plot. But I don't think so. I think after coming this far and finally getting some answers from the Guoshi, I don't think that MXTX is just going to leave us. I think we're going to be with, I hope we're with Mei Nianqing for a while, because I like Mei Nianqing a lot. Or they're going to leave Mei Nianqing and go do whatever, or face Jun Wu or whatnot. And Mei Nianqing's like, I'll hold down the fort and play some more cards. We'll see. But anyway, back to this first chapter. Jun Wu, the reason why I say that about Huachong maybe inadvertently having some kind of like connection with Jun Wu is only because one, Jun Wu was instantly able to find them, although Xianle had ascended, so that could have been the case. But if he has some connection to Huachong, whether Huachong likes it or not, that could be why he finds them instantly as well. But also, one could look at the idea, and maybe that's why Huachong is also so strong. I mean, we want to say that it's because he loves Xianle so much, and that's the power of his love. But if there's like a sliver of Jun Wu's essence in the kiln that's like helps to strengthen Huachong, I don't know. I don't know, right? And I don't want to know either, so please do not confirm. I'm going to posit theories along with what we've had confirmed. Please don't correct me. Please don't try to tell me if things are like I say or not. Let me find them out in the rest of this book. Please, please. Because we're going to talk about that a little bit here. And I was a little bit like, and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But we'll cross that Ianian bridge when we get to it. But yeah, so I don't know. We will find out. But the fact that Hua Chong is able to create a smaller ward inside of Jun Wu's ward leads me to believe that maybe there's something there. I don't know if that's why Jun Wu can't notice, because it doesn't stand out, because it's part of him, so it's not noticeable. We'll find out. I'm sure Hua Chong would not like that to know that, but again, cross that bridge. And although, if Hua Chong does happen to, if Jun Wu points out to Hua Chong, will be like, well, because you were created in my kiln, you have part of my essence inside of you, so you're like me. It would be a nice point for Xilian to counter and say, well, actually, Hua Chong is his own person. He's not like you. It would be a nice way for Xilian to kind of bounce back to Hua Chong. And plus, I mean, the kind of crazy thing is when we talk about how Jun Wu was terrified at how hideous they became, it's kind of like Hua Chong saying how hideous he is. And granted, when Hua Chong was a child, we assume that he had like bruises and cuts on his face from his abusive family. But as the Supreme Ghost, it's like, why is he worried about what Xilian thinks of him? Well, if that's part of Hua Chong, like, bleeding into his character, or part of Jun Wu bleeding into his character, then maybe that explains it. But again, we don't know for sure. And we'll talk about it at the end of the chapter and go back to that passage and talk about it. Anyway, so Ling Wen basically tricks them into having Xilian wearing the Brocade Immortal. So right now, Xilian is wearing the Brocade Immortal. Just so we're clear. That's a thing. We're going to put this on here and put this up here because we're going to move all the rest of this up and just put Xilian with the Brocade Immortal. Just so we are clear. That is a plot point. Also, I think it is well worth knowing that the Brocade Immortal is on his body right now. So even though it can't really do anything unless Ling Wen tells it to do something, which right now Ling Wen is incapacitated and is a Dromedal and can't do that, would it also protect Xilian? So if Jun Wu decides to attack Xilian, will the Brocade Immortal protect him? Or will Jun Wu inadvertently destroy the Brocade Immortal? Is Hua Chong and Xilian planning to do that? I can't see Hua Chong putting Xilian into danger, so I don't think that it will happen intentionally, but I won't be surprised if they stumble into Jun Wu in future episodes or future chapter sets, and Jun Wu tries to attack Xilian and inadvertently destroys the Brocade Immortal in the process. That could be. And then there's the question of, is the Brocade Immortal truly a creation of Ling Wen? Is Jun Wu involved in it? Don't know. It makes sense now why Ling Wen is working with Jun Wu, because she kind of feels a similar maybe sense of guilt or disgust with themselves that Jun Wu did and feels the need for vindication, we guess. But yeah, so Ling Wen, I like that Hua Chong, because Ling Wen is like so sure that she's got them, right? I have to drink juice because I think my voice from reading for an hour is like, but I feel like Ling Wen thought that she kind of had Hua Chong and Xilian like trapped in that moment, because of course Ling Wen knows that Xilian and Hua Chong like each other, so she's like, well, if you try to do anything, then Xilian's going to attack you. And that's such a cruel move, because Ling Wen knows how they feel about each other, and the last thing that Hua Chong wants is for Xilian to feel bad. But here's the thing, the last thing that Hua Chong wants is for Xilian to hurt himself. Hua Chong does not care if Xilian hurts him. And when Xilian like gives him like a 7th of his strength, oh my god. Which also, talking about the cursed shackle on Xilian, we're going to put that up here, because that gets brought up in the idea of Xilian's cursed shackle. Xilian's cursed shackle and Yin Yu. And Yin Yu's as well. We're going to put that up here as well. Because, yeah, Hua Chong makes the comment, he's like, if you didn't have these cursed shackles, you could probably destroy Jun Wu. So I'm like, yeah, imagine that. And so, of course, Jun Wu is probably really happy that Xilian encouraged those shackles to be kept on, because that's really... I get the feeling MXTX is suggesting that Xilian is the one that needs to defeat Jun Wu, but how that's going to happen, I don't know at this point. But in any case, Hua Chong uses them damn butterflies and is like, you can't go anywhere. I like that Hua Chong finally gets a butterfly to land on Ling Wen and like silences her and she can't say anything. And he makes Xilian be like, okay, it's okay that you punched me. It's fine. And it's like, I'm perfectly fine. Also, he's like, I'm a ghost. So even though you punched me in the heart, you didn't destroy my ashes, so it's okay. Right? I'm glad that Hua Chong is like, look, you can't hurt me, Xilian, even though you tried to. My ashes are safe. We're fine. Okay? So, yeah. And so then they decide to just turn Jun Wu into a Dromedal. I love it. I love the blue smoke happens and Ling Wen's like this little Dromedal. They're like, well, just put it in the pocket. Insanity, right? So at this point, there is a Dromedal of Qirong somewhere. Yin Yu had it, but now we don't know where it's at. We assume that maybe Jun Wu has it. And then this whole thing with Ling Wen is a Dromedal. That's somewhere too. It's like, oh my God. My thing is too, with the whole idea of, you know, Qirong becoming a ghost, like how does that tie into Jun Wu? I don't think it does, because Qirong just became a ghost. It's like, I feel like Shanji and Zhanlan and Qirong just all became fierce ghosts of themselves. They're not actually products of the kiln. Not like the Reverend of Empty Words, not like Heshan, not like the Yinian Bridge thing, not like Hua Chong. So there's a little bit of delineation there and difference, right? But yeah, oh my God. And so then, how is this possible? How could this be? And the Guoshi's playing cards. The idea of the callbacks at this point, and the fact that the Guoshi has been playing cards, and the 3 Guoshi from back in book 3 were all the paper dolls that were given a human form. And it all makes sense now, because it was like, yeah, those 3 don't really have a consciousness. They don't have any like individuality. No, because they're all just puppets. And Xilian, they just didn't realize it, which, God, the fact that the family, again, rule of 3, right? Rule of 3. 3 mountain spirits, 3 Guoshi, 3 friends, 3 family doll, paper dolls. Like, what the fudge? 3 supreme ghosts. The number 3 just keeps popping up. Jun Wu, Bai Wusheng, Prince of Wuyong, 3 identities. Oh my God, right? Crazy. So then, yeah. And there is something weird about the idea that the Guoshi just, it has to finish the round. It says that they swear they're going to win, but they don't win. I just might win this time. I really like Mei Nianqing. I like Mei Nianqing's character in this. I like how they just sit down, and even though they like look like a young man, they're like an old wizened uncle. He's like, let me just tell you everything I know. Oh my God. Let me tell you it all. And then just kind of like spills the beans. And thank God that Xilian gets to talk to him and finally confirm that Jun Wu, White No Face, and the Prince of Wuyong are all the same person, essentially. He's like, no doubt that he is. And he's like, I don't have a relation, do I? And he's like, nope, you're just, the only relation is that you share the crown prince and the sense that he destroyed your kingdom. And that's pretty much it. And I like the confirmation that the Guoshi didn't really know what Bai Wusheng was at the time. He was like, I didn't know. He's like, I just, you know, by the time I found out it was too late. And he's like, technically, in other words, whenever Xilian said body in abyss, heart in paradise, which we're going to find out the full context of next chapter set, whenever he said that, it pissed Jun Wu off, and he basically went off and created Bai Wusheng. I guess. He was so mad he created Bai Wusheng out of anger. But here's the thing, the body in abyss, heart in paradise, that phrase has been coming back throughout this story. The idea of whether your body is broken or whatever, your heart's in the right place, trying to, you know, your heart is trying to do the right thing, and that's all that matters. That would make, of course, Jun Wu angry, because Jun Wu tried that very thing and failed miserably. So somebody just, you know, coming up and saying it without knowing the backstory that he's gone through, yeah, you could say I would probably get a little bit irritated at that. But I want to know more, so I'm excited for the next chapter set about that for sure. And then Guoshi's like, everything started with that phrase of yours. And Xilian's like, sorry? And here's the thing that I loved was that Xilian's like, you know, he wanted to call for Hua Chong, but before he could do so, Hua Chong had come forward and sat next to him. Like Hua Chong, before Xilian didn't even have to like call for him to come to his side, he was like, I'm right here, man. Let's do this together. Oh my God, that just melted my heart. I was like, Hua Chong was gonna sit there right beside him through everything. Just melt. And so yeah, we find out about the murals. The Guoshi left behind the murals. They would sneak into Mount Tonglu and leave them behind, hoping that somebody would learn a clue to tell others about the Prince of Wuyang. He's basically been trying to expose Jun Wu this entire time, hoping that someone would come along and pick up the clues and do something with them. And Xilian finally did. And it's like, okay, that all makes so much sense. And basically Jun Wu has been scrubbing evidence away that Wuyang and the Prince of Wuyang and everything exists. Because of course they don't want to remember any of it. And they don't want anybody else calling him out. And now that he's taken control, it reminds me of a little bit Jun Wu in the Heavenly Realm. Reminds me of the movie Wreck-It Ralph. Again, we're going to add another one to the Disney roster. Reminds me of Wreck-It Ralph. And all I will say is that Jun Wu is Turbo Time. Basically. Turbo Time! That's basically Jun Wu, right? That's basically it. Except now we have Fix-It Felix and Wreck-It Ralph as Hua Chong and Xilian. You decide which one's which. But yeah. And so the Guoshi's like, I can't let him notice there's still people in the world who know about the events. Otherwise, he's going to wipe them all off. And so I love this idea that the Guoshi has essentially been roaming the world like Xilian. Only it's different, right? You have the Guoshi. The Guoshi has been like Xilian in that he's been roaming for centuries. And like tracking down like Jun Wu's monsters and just basically trying to randomly help the best that he could. And then he stumbled across Xianle and was like, hey, this prince seems a bit nostalgic. I think I'll try to like help him out. And then here we go. And the other thing is too with that is the idea that, you know, the Guoshi didn't even know about Jun Wu being the Heavenly Emperor, didn't know any of this till after the Ascension, and he was like, oh my God, this is what's been happening while I've been gone. But I like that it wasn't a conspiracy from the start. Like the Guoshi genuinely wanted to help Xilian, like he tried to help Shi Wudu and Shi Qingshong. Oh my God, the Shi brothers. And then that went to hell. It's like, I like that Mei Nianqing and Xilian have a little bit in common, where he's like, nothing ever really works out the way I want it to. Kind of like Xilian, right? So bizarre, like the similarities between them. And then Hua Chong is like, yeah, Guoshi, it's because of your betrayal. You betrayed him. So there's this really weird odd square, right? Where you have Jun Wu. You have Jun Wu and their closest, most trustedest friend, which was Mei Nianqing. And even that it's not his name, we're going to call him the Meow Meow Guoshi. We have him and this idea of there being like love and betrayal, right? And because of that, it caused Jun Wu to become evil. I feel like I'm writing like a math equation on here. Meanwhile, you have Xilian, who had their most trusted person beside them, Hua Chong, but because of love and devotion, it ended up like with Xilian staying who he is and it being a good thing. Right? But it's kind of weird because there are some like cross references here. Like Xilian is kind of like Jun Wu, but he's also like Mei Nianqing in a way because of their luck and stuff. And then you have where Hua Chong is kind of like Jun Wu a little bit in his powerfulness, but kind of like Mei Nianqing and sticking beside Xilian's side. There's just like little cross references here and there that are really interesting. But oh my God. We'll talk about Jun Wu and Mei Nianqing here in a second. But yeah, so then there's the idea we talked about. I'm so glad that some of these theories that have been posited are getting like brought to light, because we talked about how we thought that the murals were basically saying that Jun Wu wanted to create the Heavenly Bridge to get people to come over to the Heavenly Realm. And we're like, well, what ended up happening with that? And we didn't know how the story ended. And here we found out, no, the bridge collapsed. It's that case. And again, you had the idea of the rule of three, the number 3 coming up, that Jun Wu was trying to do 3 different things, right? He was trying to do 3 things. Again, he was trying to do the bridge while dealing with the heavenly officials that were against him, and then dealing with the people of Wuyong that were against him too. And it's like there's so many parallels and callbacks to Xi Lian, to how Xi Lian and all the stuff he was trying to do in Yong'an connects to Jun Wu. Although I will say, Jun Wu's bridge idea is a lot more ambitious and a lot more terrifying than Xi Lian just trying to pour water from a bamboo hat onto the people of Yong'an, right? Xi Lian's struggle seems so tame in comparison to Jun Wu literally trying to build a celestial rainbow bridge to like get the people into the heavenly realm. That's insanity. And I love that the Guoshi were like, maybe this is a bad idea. And he's like, no. So what is so fascinating here is that Jun Wu essentially saw this future for Wuyong and was like, we have to save our people. But it's like, you can't, what are you going to do? Where are you going to take the people? There is no third option, right? The options were either the people die because of the volcanic eruption, or they all migrate to other people's lands, but those people don't want to give up their lands, so there's going to cause a war, kind of like what happened between Xianle and Yong'an. And so Jun Wu tried to create this third option, which was, well, I'll just make a bridge and we'll just bide our time in the heavenly realm till I can think of what to do. Which sounds all nice and dandy in theory, but then you have the heavenly officials that are like, whoa, you can't do this. And then it's like, that's going to require so much strength and spiritual energy that it's like nigh impossible. But Jun Wu would not be deterred. And what's really sad is that originally he was like, I don't want any bloodshed. I don't want anything that will cause people to become less human. There is a sadness and a tragedy to Jun Wu in all of this, in the idea that the Prince of Wuyong, he didn't want anybody to get hurt. And he was like Xi Lian, and that he thought, well, maybe we can solve the problem by using this third option where no one will get hurt. But the problem is there was no third option. And so the kingdom of Wuyong went ahead and slaughtered people in the other kingdoms. And Jun Wu got really mad upon it. And the thing about it is, there is a little bit of distinction where Jun Wu like went out onto the battlefield and slaughtered his own soldiers that were killing others, whereas Xi Lian just kind of joined in and was like, well, I've got to protect my kingdom. I guess this is the only way. But there is a difference, because you're looking at, it's kind of like if Jun Wu was with Yong'an versus Xi Lian with Xianle, because it's like the people are migrating from Wuyong like the people of Yong'an were migrating from there. So no wonder Jun Wu, as Bai Wusheng, developed this affinity towards Long Ying, because Long Ying essentially was doing the same thing that he wanted to do from the start. So it's like, oh my God. It's like, yeah, Jun Wu had this affinity as Bai Wusheng for Long Ying because he saw the same thing happening where Yong'an was having to migrate to these other countries, and Bai Wusheng was like, yeah, slaughter all of Xianle, yeah. And meanwhile, we see here in Wuyong, Jun Wu trying to, before he, lost it, was trying to make sure that didn't happen. It's like all the parallels. It's crazy. My mind is blown, y'all. I'm trying to talk to you in this discussion, but mine is just sitting there like bogged down by all of this. And we just get everything explained to us, right? Everything. That the whole affair angered the nobles. Nobody was happy about anything that was going on, whether it was the invasion, whether it was, the Jun Wu punishing the soldiers, all of this. But Jun Wu was stubborn, and he's like, no, I'm going to have my way, which is kind of like Xi Lian throughout book 3, or volume 3 rather. So it's easy to understand, like up until the bridge collapsing, and through the bridge collapsing, I did feel bad for Bai Wusheng. I felt bad for Jun Wu, because I'm like, he tried what he thought was the solution, and the Guoshi and them were like, well, I mean, let him try it, I guess. And then it just failed miserably. Like, he tried so hard, and devoted everything. It was so narrow focused. And that narrow focus is something that Bai Wusheng has. Bai Wusheng is like solely focused on Xi Lian. It makes sense now if Bai Wusheng is like an echo of Jun Wu as the Prince of Wuyang, that Bai Wusheng is this echo. That's why it's so singularly focused and narrow-minded, because it's just this, it's this echo of Jun Wu's obsession that has manifested its own consciousness, which is like insanity, right? And so Hua Chong was like, well, I'm sure the heavenly officials were not for the bridge at all. And the Guoshi's like, yeah, they were not having it. And instead, it's like when Xi Lian was on the mountain and the disciples that Mu Qing were with, like, plotted against Xi Lian. This is like that on a grander scale. It's like all the little insignificances that Xi Lian was going through, it's like Jun Wu just amplified it by 10 as the Prince of Wuyang, right? And so the heavens just didn't blackmail him. They literally conspired to, like, tear down his temples, do all these bad things. Oh my God. Which, if Hua Chong has like a sliver of Jun Wu in him, that whole thing about challenging the 33 gods and destroying them is not unlike what Jun Wu did. So, but anyway, again, we're going to get to that. So yeah, the heavenly officials, they divided his believers and his source of spiritual power. And so we get to chapter 218, and it's the idea of the bridge collapsing. And oh my God, I really want to see this animated, the idea of the bridge collapsing and like Jun Wu's hands shaking and the prince is like becoming pale and whatever. But the idea of watching millions of people, millions of your own people falling into a sea of fire to their deaths, wailing and screaming as they did, is pretty terrifying. And at that point, I did feel really bad for Jun Wu. I was like, that sucks. Like, for all of these things to go against you and for you to try up until the very end, I did feel bad for him. I was like, that's horrible. But then we get to some very familiar things, like from book 4, where Jun Wu was banished. The Prince of Wuyang was banished. And the four Guoshi stuck with him, kind of like Mu Qing and Feng Shi did. And so he kept trying to figure out a way to ascend again. He began cultivating, but the Guoshi's like, as you know, it's rather difficult once you're banished to cultivate, especially when you're on the run in your own kingdom and there's a volcano erupting. So again, it's like everything Xi Lian was going through in book 4 amplified to like a volcanic level. It's just absolutely it's crazy. And the thing about it is, the thing that's so funny about this moment, and funny in like a dark, sinister way, is the idea that the heavenly officials, after the volcano erupted, they started showing these little graces to the people who were suddenly grateful for them, but they weren't grateful for Jun Wu as the Prince of Wuyang who tried to save them. And that reminded me of back during book 4, where Xi Lian, like, rain was coming to Yong'an. Yong'an was prospering, and Xi Lian's like, what now? You know? It's just all the parallels. It's absolutely crazy. And so the Guoshi's like, we felt really betrayed and everything was so unfair. Like, why couldn't this have been different? And then I like that Hua Chong the whole time, like Hua Chong during these chapters is just like looking over being like, you only think so, then you should have thought that from the beginning. To slice off a piece of flesh to save one person, the person would be grateful. But the more you do it, the more they're going to expect. And the Guoshi doesn't deny that they were thinking it, but they're like, yeah, but I couldn't tell him that. And so then we see the Prince of Wuyang going on a very similar path as Xi Lian. And the volcano, though, isn't letting up. And so, again, to parallel Xi Lian in book 4, but here's where things take again, we said that the Prince of Wuyang was like Xi Lian on steroids. He's on steroids here, where Xi Lian's dark solution was to rob from somebody, which is bad. But in hindsight, in comparison to Jun Wu's, like, I'm gonna kill some people, it's a pretty big step, right? It's a pretty big leap in the gap there. Xi Lian was just gonna rob some middle-aged guy on the streets. Jun Wu, as the Prince of Wuyang, was like, let's kill some bad people. And again, the moment that it's like subjective, a batch of bad people, that's when it's like, red flag. Like the red flags are flying everywhere. And of course, the Guoshi are like, no, let's not do this. And so he said, we eventually got into a fight with our fists, and the four of us had always supported His Highness and were his lifeline. But then after everything was said and done, 3 of them decided to leave, and I stayed behind. And Xianle knows all too well what that's like. And so he's like, okay, that's kind of like what I went through with Mu Qing and Feng Xin. The difference is, that when Xianle, the difference is when Xianle had Feng Xin and Mu Qing leave him, he didn't go track them down and murder them. You know? I was like, oh my God, no! And that's where the gap goes, where Jun Wu was like, oh, well, you guys don't agree with me? Fine, push you into the kiln. It's like Jun Wu went full Sweeney Todd. Like he had his epiphany from Sweeney Todd, and the epiphany was, I'm gonna kill everybody and just make it all mine. And it's like, oh no. And Mei Nianqing's like, yeah, that's kind of what happened. But yeah, he goes into full crazy town mode. Like, I mean, as if we should be surprised, because we've seen him be creepy and obsessive in the past, but like, But yeah, he's like, and then he began covering his own face, like, and that, the moment he started covering his own face, I'm like, okay, that's when we're starting to get into the Bai Wusheng business. But no, it's not that yet. Bai Wusheng is like another consciousness that's split apart, I'm pretty sure. I think we're going to find out in the next chapter for sure. But yeah, he's like, no. The volcano calmed and everything was fine, but something wasn't right. I love how MXTX just builds up the horror of this entire scene. The whole scene is built up to be this like horror moment. And I'm like, oh no. Because he's like, yeah, what does he say here? He says, something wasn't right. Even if he's like, while all my 3 friends had different personalities, they wouldn't have really just left without a care. Yeah, the moment he said the 3 friends had different personalities and all left, I'm like, oh my God. Because Jun Wu kind of seems at times, if you have Jun Wu and Bai Wusheng, like there's a little bit of a split personality there. So I thought at the moment, I was like, what if the 3 are now inside of Jun Wu and they're like coming out in different personalities, which is kind of the case, but not really. But, oh my God, yeah. It's like he just used everything to cover his face because he was horrified that the resentful spirits of his dead friends attached. It would be like if Xianle had Feng Xin and Mu Qing leave him, and then he just killed both of them and they like attached to his face. The fudge. Nope. That whole scene where he discovers what's under the mask at the end of chapter 218. Terrifying. That was absolutely insane. And the idea of them screaming his name. Nope. Done. Dunzo. And then the idea that the hand rests on his head. And I think the creepiest moment in this whole chapter set is the idea of Mei Nianqing describing like looking at the faces and then suddenly seeing Jun Wu's hand like rest on his head. And then as he looks up, he sees all 4 pair of eyes, like the 3 squirming faces, and Jun Wu staring at him. That is some nightmare fuel that I'm not ready to see animated. Nope. And then the Guoshi's just sitting there like just remembering it all, being like, oh my God, I fell to my knees at his bedside. And he's like, are you going to leave me too? And he's like, everything's changed, but what? He's like, I didn't know what to do. He's like, my friends are dead because of this man. It truly was madness. And I couldn't accept it. And then that's when the Prince of Wuyang says, I'm alone. I don't need anyone. And that's kind of what Xianle went through when he put the mask on too. It's like all of this makes sense now of why Bai Wusheng's character was like this and why Xianle reacting the way he did is exactly what Bai Wusheng wanted, because it's what he went through, right? And the only picture we get, thank God we get a picture in this chapter set. I was going to be like, if you don't give us one picture, and we do, we get, of course they cover his face. We can't see what Bai Wusheng / Jun Wu really looks like. We don't get a picture of his face. We get a little bit of his eyes, the one face there. We don't see anything else. And we see Mei Nianqing looking quite beautiful. Look at our Guoshi Meow Meow. Guoshi meow meow. Mwah, beautiful. Like crying as he's being held, showing him what you've become. And because he says, stab me in the heart. Add me to the count. I'm like, and so here's the thing. Going along with this. And one thing I was mad, again, I kind of ranted at the start of this video about spoilers, was that somebody in the Discord was like, oh, well, Mei Nianqing and Jun Wu are one of the more popular ships in the series. And I was like, can't imagine why. I was really kind of mad about that because I was like, well, I don't know hardly anything about Mei Nianqing at this point, but knowing that he's a ship with Jun Wu means that their past is inexplicably linked and there's probably a romantic moment or subplot between them, and we're going to find it out in the story, and then lo and behold, 2 days after I read this, we get the subplot of the story, and that's that basically Mei Nianqing was the person that Jun Wu trusted the most. And the whole idea of stabbing him in the heart, it calls back to the temple and everything with Shi Lian being stabbed in the heart. And like Bai Wusheng wanting him to experience how he felt. Oh my God. It's terrifying, right? The thing of it is that Mei Nianqing did not stab him. He just showed him what he was. And then as he freaked out, he like managed to get away. Right? But I felt kind of sour about that because I really would have liked the whole time I was reading this moment. I'm like, well, surprise, surprise, they're shippable. I knew that from the Discord, but would have been cool to be surprised about it now. But that's why I'm not getting on the Discord for a while. But yeah, he's like, I managed to escape and I never heard news of him again. And it was as if it was buried along with the kingdom of Wuyang. So then, yeah, we talk about the empty-shelled fakes that can speak and play cards with me. And that's when Shi Lian talks about them being the other Guoshi. And I like that. What I really like is that the Guoshi's like, now, no offense to your Xianle, but it was pretty easy to get a job there. You guys don't really do a lot of vetting in your references. I like that the Guoshi's like, look, Xianle was great. It was a nice kingdom. It wasn't Wuyang, but I just love Mei Nianqing's personality. It's like kind of diva-ish, but not. And he's like, especially when he's like, duh. But he's also like really helpful and nice. Like, I like Mei Nianqing a lot. Like, he's very, and he seems like wise, because of course he is, wise beyond his years. So it's interesting, right? It says, until someday a crown prince was born under the ominous star, and that was you. And I like that he says this. He's like, I thought it was coincidental and very much an affinity, but in truth, by then, Wuyang had been destroyed for many, many years. Of course there'd be one or two after some 100 years. It really wasn't a coincidence at all. But I felt like I should go and become your Guoshi. And that's kind of the thing. It's kind of like Shi Lian, again, becoming the Guoshi of Xianle. It's like, I mean, Shi Lian had lots of chances over the past 500 years in between when he became the Guoshi of Xianle and when, you know, Xianle claimed Xianle. He's like, he could have become the Guoshi at any one time. It just was a coincidence that it worked out, and he met Lan Chanchu and he tried to help him, just like the Guoshi did with Xianle. So I like that. Again, there's lots of parallels between both Shi Lian and Jun Wu and Shi Lian and Mei Nianqing, which I think is really interesting. And he's like, and then to find out that the Guoshi did not even know about Jun Wu being the Prince of Wuyang until they met when he became the Guoshi, that's incredible. And he's like, and then I realized, and the thing about it is, I feel like I've said that phrase, the thing about it is a lot, this discussion, but it's so interesting that the Guoshi and Jun Wu, when they met, like they both kind of knew who each other was, but after all these years, they kind of let it go, where they were like, yeah, you did this and I did this, but as long as we can keep the peace. And I feel like the Guoshi's like, yeah, I tried to keep the peace because I didn't want Jun Wu to go on a freaking murder spree again. And then you come to find out he already had. And it's like, oh no. And so he was like, yeah, I was talking with him and he was really kind of having this weird red flag obsession with you. And I was like, oh no, I really don't want to he didn't want to put Shi Lian through that. He's like, no. And so he finally figured out what the deal was. And it's that Jun Wu wants Shi Lian to become his successor. Like we've talked about in the discussions, that's exactly what he wanted. And he thinks that, and the thing about it is that at the end of the day, Jun Wu wants somebody who will never betray him and be loyal to him no matter what. And it's this, like, Jun Wu needed a Huachong. Somebody that would be devoted to him and love him no matter what. And in Jun Wu's eyes, nobody like that exists. It kind of has a very Yao vibe from Modao Zushi, and the fact that he thinks that nobody's going to be loyal to him and care for him. And I'm like, ugh. Is it bad that I want somebody to love him? Is it bad that I want him and Nianqing to make up? Is that bad? After these chapter sets, I'm like, oh shit, all Jun Wu wanted this entire time was love. And someone to tell him that he doesn't have to do all of this. And he didn't ever get that. And so instead it just drove him crazy. And I'm like, I kind of just want Jun Wu to get somebody to like love him and then, you know, get out of there. I mean, I want Jun Wu to get out of the heavenly realm. Like, guy does not need that much power. But I kind of want somebody just to love on him. That's just... It seems so sad. I'm like, damn it. And he just wanted Xilin's love, but that ain't how you go about it, that's for sure. And he's like, and then it was the great drought and the appearance of the creature, White No Face. And the fact that it's a creature is he's like, I thought it was born of nature and that it was the heavens that wanted to punish you. He's like, but no, as you came more and more in contact with that creature, it became, all of it was forcing me to think the worst case scenario. And that it was created by him. He says that plus many, many other things led me to think the worst case scenario. That it was just all... Yeah. So we talk about the family. And he's like, why didn't you tell me at the time? He's like, oh, I wasn't going to do that. If it really was him, back then you were this rebel rouser. You would have gone up to the heavenly realm and challenged him. He's like, I didn't want that to happen. No, you would have died instantly. And he's like, well, sooner or later it was going to happen. The catalyst was going to be done sooner or later. And he's like, you know, later you all were defeated. And so I sent away everyone at the Holy Royal Pavilion and then requested Jun Wu and I unmasked him directly. I wish we could have seen that. I wish we could have seen that confrontation, but we hear about it now, so it's fine. And he said that once he succeeded, you would never betray him. And I understood his intention, and in the heat of argument we started. But I also like that Mei Nianqing is really honest, where he's like, yeah, I can't fight at all, so he could kill me without moving a finger. But then his expression changed and he covered his face. So I like that the three friends that are still stuck on Jun Wu's face were actively trying to protect Mei Nianqing. They know Mei Nianqing's not a fighter. He's a maybe lover, not a fighter, and they protected him, and that's how he escaped. And so then he just drifted in the mortal realm once again and he had to hide all over the place. And that's when he went to the kingdom of Wuyang and he ran into his three friends again. Old age, sickness, and death. I love the idea that he found them and the kiln had devoured their bodies and the ashes had slowly layered over and over again and like had then taken the form of the mountain. That's so cool. I love that. And he's like, I found ways to communicate with my friends. And we finally succeeded. And I learned many things. I'm like, man. I just imagine like seeing the Guoshi like try to like learn sign language with the mountain and communicate with them. And just, that's so sweet. I mean, it's not his friends because his friends, technically their spirits are inside of Jun Wu's face. But it's like another form of them. And again, that kind of connects to the idea of shades of his friends. Like his friends, the Guoshi, were not only the spirits that are on Jun Wu's face, but they're also the mountains. So that's kind of cool. The idea that these souls can kind of split apart and like collectively gather in other things are being explored through the three Guoshi as well as Jun Wu himself. And so, yeah. So he said he slaughtered the entire heavenly court, leaving no one behind. And he's like, everything that you've heard, the story about Jun Wu being the general, the story about his background, his references, his hearsay, his appearance, character, they're all lies that he made that everyone believed. He's like, this new one is the realm that he created single-handedly. And that line, there's perhaps someone underneath your feet. Like the idea that all the heavenly officials he crushed are now just bones under the heavenly capital that are mixed into the foundation that he tramples on every day and controls. So yeah, the heavenly court is all Jun Wu's. And unless we destroy Jun Wu, which how we're going to do that, no clue at this point. The heavenly court is not a place for Xilian to be. He needs to get out of there. Him and Huachong need to leave because it's not safe to be there anymore. And so the hymn of now is the number one martial god of the heavenly realm, but his heart is an infinite darkness. Deep within resentment, pain, anger, hatred, those things need release. And the only way to maintain balance is, the only so he can continue to be the number one martial god without murdering everything is that he goes to Wu Yang and basically just vents all of his frustrations and forges malicious things from them. So he gives Hua Chong a look after he says the quality and the quantity. And this is the part where he says that, this is the part that was interesting, where he says that a supreme is only born once every 100 years. He's like, they're extremely rare and the difficulty in their creation is immense. And the past life of supreme is an independent existence. So basically, your difference is like the Reverend Empty Words and the Yin Bridge creation, those are all like shades of Jun Wu, just like Bai Wusheng. But Heshan and Hua Chong they have an individual backstory. They were once people that were not Jun Wu at one time. And so he says here that the kiln provides an environment to increase the process of their birth. Those can become supremes. Those who can become supremes can become them anywhere and would become supremes sooner or later. So it's like ascension. They're basically saying that they're humans and you either fall into ascension as a ghost. You either descend into a ghost or you ascend into a heavenly official, but it's going to happen sooner or later, right? So what the Guoshi is saying is that at some point, whether they were in the kiln or not, Heshan and Hua Chong were eventually going to become supremes. The kiln just kind of expedited the process. But it's like the word supreme, it was extracted from the meaning of peerless or top. It doesn't have much connection with whether one was trained inside the kiln or not. But being able to endure the refining of the kiln would make one an entity, since there aren't that many that could suffer through in the first place. Up until now, aren't there only 3? So it's basically like saying that Jun Wu gathered all of the spirits that could potentially become supreme ghosts and chucked them into the kiln, essentially just trying to limit how many supremes came out. Kind of like with Long Ying. Like Long Ying was destined with the king's aura to ascend to become a heavenly official, and Jun Wu kind of snuffed that out, right? So essentially Jun Wu was trying to snuff out the potential supreme ghost, but Hua Chong and Heshan emerged. Heshan powered by his lust for thirst for vengeance, maybe not lust, and Hua Chong for his love of Xi Lian. So they kind of overcame the other forces that Jun Wu had toppling over them inside the kiln, right? The question with that is, does that mean that Heshan and Hua Chong have some of Jun Wu's aura with them as a supreme ghost or not? But I guess the Guoshi is saying that that's not the case because they were going to become supreme ghosts anyway. It's not like the Reverend Empty Words or the stuff that was created from Jun Wu's energy. They were going to become supreme ghosts no matter what. So does that mean Qirong can become a supreme without going into the kiln? Is that what that's suggesting? So could we have Qirong become a supreme ghost without going into the kiln? Can this happen? Can Hua Chong fight Jun Wu? Can there be an epic battle between Hua Chong and Jun Wu and Qirong? Well, I would like an epic battle between Hua Chong and Jun Wu, sure. But could Qirong have an epic battle with Jun Wu and Qirong's like, only I can challenge my cousin? And have that, please? I guess that's what he's suggesting. I think the Guoshi is saying that you can become a supreme ghost at any time. So there is hope for Qirong to become a supreme, or Banyu could become a supreme, or the Venus spirit could become a supreme. Oh my god. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but that's just what that leads me to believe, right? But he's like, yeah. So everything produced were monsters forged by his hatred and resentment, such as the Reverend of Empty Words. He's like, that was the earlier productions of the kiln when that happened. So unlike a few hundred years, the earlier sessions were every few years. And that's where the Yidian Bridge ghost came from, all that other stuff. So, and then we find out why he was like, oh, what a silly name, Shi Xingchong. And that's when we find out that he was the fortune teller that told them to who told them not to host the feasts. And he's like, duh. I think he's like, what other fortune teller would just work for a bowl of porridge? I also like that, I love that the Guoshi points out that, Xianle is just a bastard. The Guoshi has no nice things to say about Xianle. They're like, they are a bastard, they were vicious, they were too difficult to deal with, and by the time I came back, after I found out about the Reverend of Empty Words, he'd already caused all this mess and had just did all this wickedness and was beyond comprehension. And I like to watch songs like, yeah, that's all kind of settled right now, so we're good. But yeah, the shade thrown at Xianle, the shade. And so he's like, the Reverend Empty Words wasn't even that powerful. It just liked to go stir up trouble. It wasn't even rankable. There were others, such as the one on Yidian Bridge. But you just had to defeat that monster. He could sense the ghost was killed by somebody, so he descended and saw you. And you had to utter that phrase, and it was a mad jab at him, a fatal blow. And that was the turning point. Oh my God. Yeah. The shade thrown at Xianle is hilarious because the Guoshi is just like, ah, what an idiot. But at least he's somewhat nice to the Windmaster, right? Right. Right. Oh my God. Madness, y'all. Madness. I cannot wait to read the next set of chapters. I've talked for an hour about these, but I'm sorry if this discussion was just scattered, but my brain is just fried from having that exposition nuclear bomb thrown at us from MXTX. MXTX is like, well, you wanted answers, so I'm going to give you all the answers. But the thing about it is we don't have all the answers. We still don't know, like, okay, so now that we know Jun Wu's backstory, we still need to learn a little bit more about Bai Wuxiang, which I think we're going to learn about next set, hopefully. We still need to know what are we going to do. Now that we know this, the problem is Jun Wu is in control of the Heavenly Realm. They have control of it. So what are we going to do about that? Are we going to escape? Where do we escape to? Can we escape back to the Ghost City? What do we do about Jun Wu? Are we going to just let him control the heavens and destroy everything? Like, let Bai Wuxiang rage hell on earth while he's up there, like, chilling? What do we do with all of this? And then what about Mu Qing? What is he talking with him about? Ling Wen's in the Daruma doll? What about Pei Ming? What about the Thunder Master? What about Lan Shan Chu? What about Qi Rong? Like, what's going to happen with all these other characters? So, yeah. I will tell you right now, I'm going to wait to get some comments from this last week's set of chapters because I'm recording this a little bit early right now. But I'm not going to wait long. I'm going to be, as soon as I get those chapters and can read them, I'm going to be on the next set of chapters, which is going to be chapters 220 to 222. You better darn believe it. So, oh my gosh. But yeah, in the meantime, holy cow. I hope you all enjoyed this reaction discussion. I feel totally scatterbrained. I need to go calm down, collect myself, and reread these chapters. But I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week with chapters 220 to 222 of Heaven Official's Blessing. Bye!